Blog Talk Radio.
Here we go with the main event of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen in attendance, boxing fans joining us around the world. It's time for the Matthew Ball we're waiting for. Finally, it is showtime.
Here, man, we dedicate our life to this sport. We do thousands of sit-ups in camp. We run hundreds of miles, for the ones that take it serious. And we just dedicate ourselves fully to our craft, man. We watch tape. We have attitude. We rooting, and we go into that fight to land on the line.
Boxing fans, this is the Rope-A-Dope Radio Podcast. I am your host, Chris Carlson. We are live on a Tuesday night, a couple of hours before the NBA playoff kicks off. Game 3 Game 3. So I'm trying to kind of sneak this in. I know everybody's kind of focused on that tonight. But as far as in the boxing world, we do have a very interesting card coming up this weekend, Saturday. It's going to be interesting, man. I really like this card. The Charlo twins are leading their first pay-per-view. There's been a whole lot of talk about that subject, or no talk at all. Which one's worse? We'll find out. But either way, and I'm talking about the media, by the way, when there's no talk at all. But yeah, I mean, Charlo versus Rosario for the lineal at 154. Charlo versus Daravanchenko. Top 5 guys going at it. I don't know how stylistically that's not going to turn out to be a really good fight. We also have Josh Taylor and Briedis Dorticos, which should be a brawl as well. So it's a busy, busy fight weekend. Obviously, we're actually coming off a fairly busy fight weekend, too. We had Lubin, we had Boots, we had Pedraza, we had F.A. We had a variety of stuff that we'll get to a little bit later. There is, some news out there a little bit. We'll go over a boxing Twitter segment where people just say some funny-ass stuff on Twitter, or some really good serious stuff, or just whatever. Some of it's just like, really, dude? Wow. You're lost. And then current fight news, too. There is some talk out there, no doubt about it. And we're not really going to talk about the Mayweather-Logan Paul stuff, but is that really a shocker? We actually had a conversation on with Carcino last week, and he said there is going to be a fight announcement fairly soon. We've heard rumors of Mayweather coming back. We didn't know if it was going to be overseas, real quick to take some money. If it was going to be based here, it's going to take a lot of money to get him back. And without the crowds, I don't know how he's going to fight here per se, but you never know. But, yeah, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time at that because, that's just fake fights. But Ryan Garcia kind of got into the Jake Paul? Is that his? The guy can throw a pretty good, decent punch from what I've seen. He rolled up on him with the contract. It's like, what is going on? Didn't we have the Garcia-Campbell fight? But anyway, like I said, we're going to dive into this stuff. Pedraza looked pretty sharp in a winnable fight for him, obviously. F.A. didn't really look too good at the spot. At times, it's kind of been like a rinse-repeat type thing where you're like, hey, dude, you gotta set your jab up. Oh, set your punches. Okay, there you did. There's a jab in the right hand. It came clean. He doesn't set his punches up. A little funky there. Boots, though, Ennis, man, he had a highlight reel uppercut that changed the whole fight. Not that he was going to lose it, but, man, that was a great punch. King Tug looked good early, and then all of a sudden a dude who not a whole lot of us knew about, really showed himself to be a quality fighter. And then Erickson Lubin. Erickson Lubin put on a performance to win the fight cleanly, no doubt about that. But if you look at the first, 6-7 rounds, I understand, taking your time, and obviously he's patient. He's more patient than he was because he got stung in the first round. But it took to the 7th, 8th, 9th to really start to heat up. And, his opponent, Gachier, it was his fault too. He was trying to go for the counter. There wasn't a whole lot going on until, like I said, later in the fight. And it really felt like maybe round 3 or 4 that actually would start to take place, and that just was not the case. So we're going to definitely dive in to all of this stuff here in just a little bit here. Real quick, though, before we get into, like I said, which is just a stacked weekend, I'm really excited. This is, when we bring boxing back on the championship level, it is fun as a boxing fan. There's a lot going on, obviously. Politics, like all the NBA playoffs, like I said, and the NFL going head-to-head. College football is going to be almost fully back in a couple of weeks. But it is nice to sit back and appreciate coming off a busy weekend, and then going into even a better weekend, even on paper, no doubt about that. But before we get there, if this is your first time listening to the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast, welcome. It streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. It streams live and archives. However, you don't have to go to Blog Talk and archive. Some people just listen to the browser or download it there. You don't have to do that. The Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast is available at Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Stitcher. We're also part of the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network, which can be found everywhere, including Spotify. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegruelingtruth.com. It's boxing, it's football, it's baseball, it's basketball, it's everything in between. And one more thing, if you're thinking about cutting the cord, or you're not quite happy, I got something for you. I use it myself. It's called AT&T TV Now. It's live streaming cable. They have the 7-day free trial. There's no annual contracts. The plans start as low as $55 a month. You can stream it anywhere. They do have the cloud DVR. Right now, there's 2 deals I'm going to tell you about. You sign up right now for this, you get a free trial, 30-day trial of HBO Max. If you sign up for the AT&T TV Now Max package, that will already include HBO Max, plus a free month of Showtime, which is normally $11. So boxing fans, just a heads up. That's AT&T TV Now, like I said, live streaming cable. Okay. So we're going to talk about a variety of stuff here. And like I said, it was, I wouldn't call it an eventful weekend. That's for sure. But it did have a fair amount of fights going on. None of them were overly, eventful. The undercard was very entertaining on Showtime. No doubt about it. The main event, not so much. Both main events, kind of fell short of two-way action or even, especially with Lubin, it took him so long to take that second gear. And, you don't have to go bombs away. You don't have to do the little Irish jig dance that he did a couple of years ago where he bounced down on the ground, got up and knocked out. I'm not looking for just home run hits. But you can bunt on, you can get a double, you can steal third or steal second to third. You can break down the body. You could just open up your offense a little bit more, and then once you start to lay it on him, then you can really go after it. But I can understand he may just kind of be stuck in a style right now. He may think, you know what, I just got to get past this fight, and I'm back in a big fight. Why not play it safe? Because after all, he did get hit really hard, and it affected him late in the fight. Pretty much 2 separate times. One for sure, but then he even got hit like a round later, and it was like, oh, wait a second, hold on, hold the phone. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag there, I'd say. So yeah, let me just see something here. Someone's saying, all right, because we all know my live chat is my text or my DM or whatever. Just making sure people can hear there. Okay, we're good. So yeah, it was so-so weekend. so-so weekend, but we're going to talk a variety about what went on last weekend. I'm just going to try to get confirmation for 304 to see if, in fact, if it is John. I know John, really solid boxing guy on Twitter, lawyer as well. Want to get his take on a couple of things. I'm just seeing if that's you. I actually don't have his number now that I think about it. You could press 1, John, if that's you. If not, that's someone just showing. I see some numbers, but only one really stands out. Okay, cool. As something that I didn't quite know. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in John to the fold, long-time boxing fan, very entertaining on Twitter, and not just in some sort of goofy, I'm going to get likes and tweets. The dude knows his stuff. Really the layers of knowledge I've gotten off this guy just following him. He's a great follow. I'm going to go ahead and bring in John. What's going on, man? How the hell are you, buddy?
Hey, Chris, thanks for the kind words there, and thanks for having me tonight.
Oh, yeah, of course, man, of course. We are going to get into the fun stuff, obviously. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this weekend, even though, guys like Kevin Iole, who knows a whole lot about the sport, I guess got mad because he didn't get the press release before everybody, even though they kept it really quiet. And that was part of the battle of keeping it quiet all that long, that Showtime announcement is what I'm talking about. But this Charlo card, it does seem like a lot of the media are just focused on, the pay-per-view thing. And I understand. I mean, I guess my thing is the consistency. The last, say, decade or so, and we're going to get into the fights. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on this. The last, say, decade or so, the pay-per-views that we've gotten, what I've heard from the media, and I've been doing the podcast for 10 years. I've been on even boxing Twitter, right, for 10 years. So you know a thing or two. You followed all these guys. You know what they're saying. You know what they're not saying. You know what kind of fight they like. You kind of almost get to know how they're going to do a scorecard, just like you do your friend and stuff like that. The biggest thing as far as saying these fights shouldn't be on pay-per-view or whatever, a lot of it was based off of certain fights like a Canelo Liam Smith, like a Mayweather Berto, like a Pacquiao Rios, like a, something like that. Even some other fights that I could mention. And, a lot of people say, well, these fights wouldn't even be on pay-per-view, but don't realize, Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones 2 and Holyfield against somebody in 2010 was actually a pay-per-view. Like, it's kind of like, I understand that the platform does shrink the exposure, definitely. The problem I have is, why weren't you saying this with all these HBO pay-per-views for years? 1, you're not consistent, and 2, you're also bigging up the UFC, which in many ways, you can definitely say a lot of positive things about the UFC, but they do have like 10 to 12 to 14 pay-per-views a year. So ever since they left Spike, which once they got that thing going, they were getting $2 million every time out there as far as just on basic cable. They've actually kind of killed their exposure. They never got obviously as big as boxing did before. It shrunk on HBO and whatever over the years. But what are your thoughts on really people honing in on just the pay-per-view, but then they asked all these last, let's say, 10 years that they want a quality main event and a quality co-feature. Give me something to sink my teeth in. And I think that they delivered that with this Charlo card. Now, I'm not talking to the people that just don't buy pay-per-views. There's plenty of people that are just anti-pay-per-views. You know what? That's consistency. It has kind of – I know this has kind of been the theme with these pay-per-views ever since PBC took over, so there's no secret there. But what are your thoughts on bang for your buck and where this thing stands comparatively over the last 10 years, sir?
Chris, I think you perfectly framed what the issues are from a business perspective and the sport of boxing perspective going into this Saturday's pay-per-view, which that to me is sort of the dichotomy, and that's the part I have mixed emotions about. I think the one part you framed perfectly was that, when HBO started to go with too many pay-per-views. In other words, there was a point somewhere along the line when, if you'd been following boxing long enough, you got to a point where you were saying, this is a regular HBO fight that has become HBO pay-per-view. Then Showtime did that somewhat, and it got to be where there was too many pay-per-views. On the other hand, if you look at who's buying the pay-per-views at this point, and really even who's watching boxing, I think really it is just about all hardcore fans. I don't even think, unfortunately, really the casual boxing fan really exists anymore. And why that matters is the good part of what we're getting. The bad part is maybe we're getting another pay-per-view that maybe years back, let's face it, this might have been a Showtime fight, even with the two good co-features. But the positive part about it is one of the things we lost along the way, which all those weaker type pay-per-views you described, was especially for hardcore fans, the undercards had gotten to be mostly garbage. And why that matters, which when we're just having hardcore fans watch, is if you looked at a lot of the TV execs that were being honest, and Bob Arum even at times, and Stephen Espinosa is a pretty straight shooter, they would say, well, when we're appealing to a casual fan on a pay-per-view, they're just buying it for the main event anyway, so why should we waste anybody else on the undercard that we could have on another pay-per-view some other time, or a big HBO or Showtime fight. But, like we all kind of harken back to, there was kind of a middle level where, Don King, love him or hate him or in between, the one thing he was doing positively for a while was like when he kept running those Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. pay-per-view cards a lot, the undercards were really good. You had guys like Felix Trinidad fighting, and you felt like as a fan you were getting your money's worth. I know you probably feel like I do a lot of times, when you're paying for just the main event and it doesn't work out well, which in a sport like boxing can happen. It can happen in MMA too. You don't feel satisfied when you've paid, even though you knew the risk, and the undercard was just absolute garbage. So, we're getting back. I felt for a while like with all the hardcore fans really being the buyers, we needed to get back to at least a better quality card. So I'm encouraged by that, but there is the downside of, are we getting too many pay-per-views? Like you pointed out again correctly, people tend to forget the UFC basically runs a pay-per-view a month, and now you've got to be an ESPN Plus subscriber to get their pay-per-view as well. So you got to do two things there. So that's not great, but their cards have been deeper. Again, I also watch MMA. I've got a longer history with boxing, and that's definitely the first love. But the MMA cards, again, love them or hate them, but you got to be fair, objective. They've been a little bit deeper, but they run a pay-per-view a month, which is too much. And frankly, a lot of their main event pay-per-views really haven't justified that either. So I think these are the business issues going into Saturday night.
Yeah, I like how you shaped a lot of that, and it is kind of funny to see the media pump up that last card when you think, well, that main event was pretty one-sided, not that interesting of a fight either. Of course, that wasn't pay-per-view, but in general, they literally run one on ESPN. I think it's 12 a year, and the rest is either ESPN Plus or pay-per-view. So when we talk about exposure, it's really about just being consistent. But you are right. It's really, boxing fans have a ton of casual fans, but we do not activate them. They just don't. We saw it the last couple of years with HBO. If you look at, and that's what's funny about the PBC ones that do hit 250 or 300 or 350 or whatever, right, in that range. When Pacquiao and Marquez and guys that featherweight division, a lot of those were on pay-per-views, and a lot of those were like from the 250 to 350 range, and they weren't complaining about them, and we didn't know they were Hall of Famers just yet at that time. We got to look back at that. So you're right, the quality card, I do think that Fox, besides their first one, as far as just Fox alone, if you look at what they did with Spence Porter, Thurman Pacquiao, even Wild Ortiz too, that undercard, they have given us entertainment. The PBC, I didn't like Pacquiao Broner, but the undercard was good. So yeah, it is kind of a mixture of all that. But I keep hearing, well, it's just, if something hits 320 or 350, they say, oh, that's just hardcore. It's like, okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's a level of hardcore. But how come, Kovalev and Ward couldn't break 200,000 then? Where were the hardcores then? So you're right. It's about activating that fan base, because I can talk to so many people and bring up a name or two, and they'll be like, oh, dude, when is that? Or whatever. But, it is about activating them. And boxing is, done no favor to itself, no doubt about it. Obviously, promoters stand out, television networks stand out, managers, fighters. It's a whole lot of blame to go around. If we call someone the best promoter of all time, we also have to realize how we got to where we got to, too, and they have to have some of the blame there, too. But it is kind of funny how, if you ask for a pay-per-view product to be better and you get it, can you at least play both sides of it, much like you just did when I asked you a question? It's not, well, I shouldn't say playing both sides. You just told the story. Okay, this is it. Yeah, that's not great, but hey, it's better than that, isn't it? So, speaking of these fights, though, obviously Charlo, Daravanchenko on paper seems like the much closer 55th with the 50-50 with the betting odds. Charlo Rosario, I think, is going to be a blast in the ring. And by the way, if people are high on Charlo or Rosario with this, the power that he does, he is pretty explosive. He opens himself up, but he's like a plus 310, plus 350, plus 330. It's gone up from what I see. So just a heads up out there. We'll talk a little bit of odds later in the show as well. Can you break down what you think is going to happen in both of these really, main event co-feature, even though it is a 6-fight ordeal?
Yeah, Chris, these are both really interesting fights. And let me just add, before we get into the breakdown, just tying up what we were saying, and I know you're aware of this too. One thing that's interesting about what PBC is doing in the Charlos would be a perfect example of it. And I think HBO had meant well when they did it, but at the end of HBO's run, they decided, well, we're going to sign and go with who we perceive to be the best fighters, even if they're not Americans. Really, that strategy didn't end up working. And, outside of Canelo, the pay-per-view business obviously faded. Now, Andre Ward's an American, but, he's fighting Kovalev, a Russian, and, those pay-per-views didn't do well, really, even though they were close on paper. Now you've got guys like the Charlos, who PBC has been exposing, on Fox. They've gotten network exposure. Of course, they've also gotten Showtime exposure, but they've gotten network exposure. So, I think they were building towards this, and we'll see how it goes. We're in the pandemic, but I like the doubleheader idea, and these are both very interesting fights. The first one, I guess, which is going to run first, the fight that actually to me is more interesting is Jermall Charlo and Sergey Daravanchenko. Daravanchenko, I thought the fight could have gone either way. I don't think it was a robbery or anything like that. But and he did get dropped in the fight, which of course hurt him. But I thought he did do enough to beat Golovkin. But it wasn't a robbery or anything like that. But I think he did enough to win that fight. So he's coming off a good performance there. But he did get dropped. I thought Jacobs beat him a little more clearly, but he also got dropped in that fight. So the knockdowns are a problem for him. His nickname is the Technician, and he is very good technically. So, he's got a lot of skills, from that Ukrainian amateur program. But I think I've always been a big believer in Jermall Charlo. He was originally the one that was the puncher, and Jermell has caught up to him since Jermell went with Derek James. But Jermell was the boxer before that and wasn't a puncher at all. It's been a pretty amazing transformation. But getting to Jamal, he's always been the puncher. He had a couple distance fights where he didn't look as good against Trout, who could make anybody look bad. Didn't get Adams out of there, and had trouble with Korobov. I thought he won it, but he didn't get him out of there. But, he's had some explosive knockouts, too, against Centeno. He did what I think you should do with Brandon Hogan. He got him out of there, and, Hogan's sort of a boxer. So, he's got Julian Williams out of there quickly. I think his punching power's for real. Daravanchenko's tough. I definitely feel Jamal Charlo is going to win this fight, even though the odds are close. I strongly feel he's going to win it. I haven't just whether he stops Daravanchenko or not. I have a hunch that he might, that this is going to be really a breakout performance for him, and all the people who don't like Charlo and like somebody like Golovkin will say that Daravanchenko didn't have anything left after Golovkin. So you could get ready for it.
Right, of course.
But I think it's going to be more of a case of not that. It's going to be a case of Jamal Charlo is a guy hitting his prime, and I think this is a feature that he's going to be up for. Daravanchenko's tough. It's not going to be any gimme, but I see some people picking Daravanchenko. I myself, even though he's a very good fighter, I don't see that. I think Charlo is going to win this fight. I'm leaning towards that he will stop him before it's over, but that part about it I'm not particularly confident about because Daravanchenko is tough and skilled. But I do feel that Jamal Charlo will be able to keep him out at a distance like Jacobs did a lot of the time, and he'll be able to. I think Jacobs punches hard, but Jacobs is not actually all that active. I think Jamal Charlo will be more active, and I think that's going to be the difference here. It might look something like the Jacobs fight, but I think that Charlo will be punching harder, and I don't think that Daravanchenko is going to be hitting Jamal Charlo like he hit Golovkin, because I do think that Golovkin's easy to hit, especially with the right hand. He gets credit for his defense that he doesn't really deserve. He's always been there to be hit, even against lesser opposition. So I think that Jamal Charlo is actually better defensively than Golovkin is. So I don't think he's going to take the shots that Golovkin did, and I think he'll get the win.
Yeah, and it always seems like Daravanchenko, he may take a little while to get warmed up. Once he gets going, he puts his rounds together. But even against Cloquet and many other fights, there's a time where he either wears down or gets caught with something and hurt, much like that Korobov fight. It took a little while for Charlo to kind of, get that figured out. That was a late replacement. His brother did just lose, and maybe that did mess him up. He did talk about how I need to clear my head. And then once he kind of got it together, then he really started looking better. But that was still later in the fight. Do you think it'd be more of like a TKO if he does get the stoppage? Everybody can land a big punch or whatever, but do you kind of see maybe a wearing down, a closed eye, or do you think, Sergey will kind of hang in there and he's already kind of shown us that he can make it to 12 rounds?
I think he'll hang in, but then what I'm leaning towards, like I said, I don't feel as confident about it as I do just the fact that I feel Jamal Charlo will win. I see him, accumulating some punishment on Daravanchenko, and then maybe hitting him with a series of shots, in the second half of the fight, maybe enough to get a stoppage. I'm leaning that way, but it wouldn't surprise me if it went to 12 and Charlo got the decision either.
I have been kind of teeter-tottering around that TKO. Not quite sure where I'm going with that. As far as Rosario, he had a great performance. He's been on FS1 a bunch. I think he was on an undercard on the Fox too, but definitely on FS1. He beat J-Rock in one of the upsets of the year, of course. He didn't start that great in that fight, but then he turned the tide, and he's got a lot of pop, got a lot of power, has some holes in the game, gets squared up, kind of a wide puncher at times. But, when you look at getting the full camps, there's excuses and reasons, and sometimes we find out later, that was a real reason, because, look, this is what he's doing now. I hearken back not that long ago, to use that word, John, but to Maidana. Not the same fighter, not even talking about that. But remember, before he was able to get with Heyman, he would get the 3-week notice. He would have a 3-week camp. Even if he had a bigger 6 to 8 weeks, his management just wasn't there, and he'd have 3 or 4 week camps and show us that in the ring still. What can we say about a full camp now back to back, kind of finding his groove? We know the old, if you win a championship or even if you get a big fight, that extra layer, that extra percentage of confidence that gets installed into a fighter. What do you think about a full camp with Rosario? Because to me, Charlo has been more aggressive ever since that Jackson fight about 4 years ago when they got this 154-pound division rolling on that Trout. I think it was Trout. God, I can't remember who, but the other Charlo brothers were on the undercard. But it was a triple header with 154, and he had to go get Jackson. He talked about it because you're right. The other Charlo, Jamal, was really more power, and people were talking about him more, whereas the boxer, more of a crisp jab, more of a fundamentally sound Mel was fighting better fighters at the time back in the day, but people weren't really talking about him. I mean, both of them were kind of valued at the time as far as where they could go. But, Jermell is more aggressive. And even in that Tony Harrison fight, I'm not trying to say that he can do on the bat book, Rosario, what Harrison can do in his comfort zone. But what do you think about, maybe Jermell kind of going with that aggressive style a little too much and getting caught with a guy along with that full camp thing? Because most people think, I've seen a lot of, he's going to stop in the 6th round. It's a one-sided fight. I don't think it's a one-sided fight. I definitely favor Charlo here because I think he's got more ways to win. But what do you think about that full camp angle? Because we have seen it, and that's why I brought up Maidana, because all of a sudden you're like, whoa, Garcia's got him using his jab. What's going on? Oh, shit. We knew the guy could fight, but when he got a full camp, he was a different beast.
Yeah, well, here's one where I think we disagree probably a little bit at what we're looking at, because I do think Rosario was a solid fighter. We did see him on a lot of PBC cards, which is one of the things that's been great about PBC with these, network appearances, and then on FS1, you've gotten to know these guys especially if you're a hardcore fan, and that helps the enjoyment of the fight. So let's face it, we've been watching these guys for a few years, and Rosario was one of those guys on the undercards. But he got stopped by Gallimore. He was always a solid fighter, but nothing that really stood out to you. And then he was explosive against Julian Williams, and there's no doubt it was a great performance. But I tend to look at it more like, I don't want to say fluke, because he did it with, his heart and aggression, and he showed power in that fight. It was a totally legitimate victory, but I just don't have that feeling like he's going to be replicating that type of a performance. Both of the Charlo brothers have shown great chins so far. Jermell, who's fighting Rosario, he's made in all the years I've been watching boxing, one of the most amazing transitions, because you see it so rarely. The guy was a boring boxer who worked off the jab on his way up, and as you correctly pointed out, Chris, the buzz wasn't really building, and one of the reasons is you watch those, they would be on the same card, but you would watch those Jermell fights, like you said, even though he was fighting the better guys at the time. I mean, his fights were dull. And then he kind of feels like his growth's being stunted, and he goes over to Derek James, Errol Spence's trainer, and they turn him into an aggressive power puncher like his brother. And normally when a guy does that, the power still doesn't come, but with him the power has come. And I think that it is going to be something like the fight with Tony Harrison too. I think that Rosario punches a little harder than Harrison, but I see this being similar where Jermell's going to press it. And, he may be open like you're saying, and, Rosario showed great power against Williams, but Charlo's got a better chin, and I think Charlo is going to hunt him down, and I do think it probably will be around the midpoint of the fight. I could see Jermell getting him out of there. I see something like the second Harrison fight for Jermell Charlo, which was an excellent fight. Might be at a little more risk with Rosario's power, but he's shown the chin, and I think that he'll be able to put that pressure on. And I think what he learned in that first Harrison fight is he's not going to back off on that kind of pressure. I did think that was a robbery. I thought he got robbed in the first Harrison fight. I do think he should be undefeated because I do think that was
I did have winning too. I had the Korobov fight a much closer fight, on that card.
That was close. Right, that was tight. That was a very tight fight. I thought Jermall Charlo pulled that out maybe at the end, just at the end, very close fight. But I just thought Jermell, beat Tony Harrison. I didn't know where the judges were coming from that night. And I don't use the term robbery easily like a lot of people do, but that is one in recent years I did think that was a robbery. I could not see Harrison getting that decision, but I think that Jermell learned a little bit in that fight that, he's going to press and not let that happen to him again. And he's become extremely exciting. It really is one of the most dramatic transitions I've seen in all my years of watching boxing. Of course, Arturo Gatti was a boxer, up through his first alphabet belt that he won. And then, he became a legendary brawler. So, that might be another example you look at, but you don't see it very often. It's rare when a guy does that with power. But, Jermell Charlo is doing it. It's been very entertaining, and I think that this is a good opportunity for him to have a showcase because I think Rosario had that one big performance against Julian Williams, but I don't think he's going to be able to come close to replicating that against Charlo.
Yeah, that's a good call. I do see a lot of, he's going to flatten him in 5 rounds, and I'm just like, I'm not ready to say that just yet. I think he's going to knock him out, but I just don't know about that. This is going to be easy fighting. When he comes forward, I actually had him. I had it 5-5 or 6-4 Harrison in the rematch before he knocked him out. So I was kind of like, oh boy, this is actually going to turn into a trilogy, and obviously it can in a year or two or whatever, and I'd be just fine with that. I'm glad they didn't go right to it. Is there anything else you want to mention? Obviously, Britas Dorticos from the weekend is going to be an all-out brawl. Josh Taylor returns against a hard puncher who he should be able to be okay against. Obviously, the undercard, there's some, I'd say, interesting fights that are going to be entertaining to watch, but none of them stand out as that's a 50-50 by any stretch. Anything else you want to highlight with this weekend before we kind of get into what happened over the last weekend?
Yeah, I would, Chris. I think you make a good point with the undercard. I like what PBC's doing here, but as you correctly pointed out again, that's mainly focused on the 2 Charlos. I think it is worth shining a little light on the undercard because there are some flaws here, even though, again, the good thing is these are PBC guys we've been seeing. We're getting to see them again. But even though this is a multi-fight pay-per-view, I'd like to see some of these be a hair better. If you look at the record of, the guy Mary's fight, and he's undefeated, but he hasn't fought anybody.
Right.
And he's not that big of a puncher. When Mary's ready to go, I mean, you cannot like his past PED issues and coming in overweight, but the guy's a destroyer for, he's going to be fighting at 122, I guess now. And I don't think any nondescript opponent is going to be ready for a prepared Luis Neri. So I think that could be a blowout. And Brandon Figueroa, we're speaking of guys who could box, who brawl. Brandon Figueroa is one of those guys. Now, he's pretty much been aggressive his whole career, but he seems to have a skill set where he could box, but he chooses not to. It's very entertaining. But I think he has the frame and the skills that he could box, chooses not to. But, Vasquez, the guy he's fighting, look, these are pro boxers. We want to have respect. But, if you looked at him against Payano, and you look, even though he did go the distance, but if you looked at who he fought before that and you looked at the way he performed, he really is not skilled. He just does not bring a lot to the table. And the way, Brandon Figueroa has been fighting aggressively, even though he's coming off a draw, he was at a disadvantage in that fight with Ceja, who came in way over the weight, fought him anyway, and entertaining brawl, got a legit draw. I don't hold that against him because of that, and I just think he's going to plow through Vasquez. So I don't think that's going to be competitive. Casamaero and Micah, I think Casamaero is definitely going to win that fight. I don't know if he stops him or not. He's come up from flyweight. He's 5'4". Micah is 5'7". He's a bit bigger. He might be able to go the distance, but I think, again, not much doubt to me that Casamaero is going to win that fight.
I think that's a good action fight, good TV fight where you're like, oh, these dudes are really going at it, but other than that, that's about it.
Yeah, and you kind of get a little curious if Casamaero can kind of duplicate what he did against Tete, so you watch it. But I don't feel like that's one where we really have a lot of doubt about who's actually going to win the fight. And then I guess you got Payano and Roman. Roman might not stop him, but I just don't see Payano winning that fight either. I think Roman should coast to a decision at the least. So not too much doubt, like you said, in those. There is doubt with the Dorticos and Briedis, which is going to be on DAZN. Briedis is a solid fighter who's, he's knocked out heavyweights himself, even though this is at cruiserweight, and, Dorticos is a huge puncher at cruiserweight. So I like the matchup in that sense. Of course, Briedis was very competitive against Usyk when they fought. But there's just something I like about Dorticos. I like his aggression. I like his power. These are both guys, to me, that can fight at heavyweight, and I'd like to see that. That's where the money and the glamour is. But they're going to do the cruiserweight thing Saturday. Tough fight to call. I assume he's going to be an underdog. He is an underdog in it, but I think Dorticos is going to find a way to win this one.
Yeah, that can go either way because Dorticos, man, when he lays it on you, dude, it's not going to be pretty. He definitely has a way to change a fight, and I think it will be a two-way just action fight. Obviously, it's been a fight that we've been waiting for a while as far as a variety of things that went on with this fight. So it's nice for both guys to actually get that payday in general. As far as the two main events from Showtime and ESPN Plus last week, Pedraza and Lubin, let's take a gander at that. Pedraza looked pretty much the same. I'd say he looks pretty good. 140, we'll see how that goes. When he went to 135, he said 135 was a little tougher to make, so he feels comfortable at 135. Jumping up to 140, we'll see if that, if he can hang with the guys up there. It feels like he probably can because he does have a pretty good style for it. But Zapata actually, he just lost to not long ago. But he looked kind of his normal self, his little in and out. I know they were talking about. I know Timothy Bradley. They brought up Lomachenko-esque, which is just like, all right, dude, I get it. You're broadcasting, but then you leave it up to the fighter and Tim Bradley that says, I don't think at 140 anyone's going to want to fight him. It's like, Timothy, calm down a little bit. I loved you as a fighter when a lot of people didn't like your bruising style. I loved it, but come on, dude, you're the fighter. You're saying nobody's going to fight Pedraza? That was a little weird, but, we're used to that, especially nowadays, some of these broadcasts in general. So I thought he looked pretty good. We could talk about FA a little bit later as well and some of the undercards. Lubin seems like he is kind of stuck in between what he wants to do offensively or as an overall fighter. It's funny because we're all on Twitter pushing him to come forward earlier, but then he got caught and hurt kind of bad late in that fight. What'd you think of those two in the main event, the two victorious fighters?
Well, first, I guess go talking most recently to Lubin and Gaucher. To me, if you watch Erickson Lubin's whole career, even before he got KO'd in the first round by Charlo, and I did pick Charlo in that one going in, Lubin was always up and down to me when you watched his fights coming up. There'd be one night he looked spectacular, and then he'd look kind of mediocre, and it got me where I wasn't as high on him as some other people. And I felt like we were seeing that again Saturday night. I mean, Gaucher hasn't been stopping anybody. He's not a puncher. He hurt Lubin badly, and it was a dull fight before that point. It kind of startled Lubin because he did almost get knocked out, really. He was in that bad of trouble. I'm not saying Gaucher followed up where he got that close to stopping him, but Lubin was definitely in trouble, and it got him fighting a little more. And, that was late in the fight after it was a dull fight. Gaucher can make you look bad, but Lubin getting hurt by a guy like Gaucher who just really hasn't been hurting or stopping anybody, it's just a bad sign. And with his up and down nature, I just think, he's shown some moments. He's got a good trainer, Kevin Cunningham, but I think that I just don't feel the overall ceiling is there. I think he's going to fall into my knockout waiting to happen group. I have a few guys out there like that. Dillian White was one of those guys before Povetkin iced him. Just a few guys out there that I see certain vulnerabilities. Now, Lubin has some skills, so, with White, to me, it's more of a talent type thing. But, with Lubin, he's up and down and get stopped and won by Charlo and then get rocked by Gaucher. There's going to be a fight here where it's not going to end up well for him coming up. And Gaucher had a great, amateur career, but he's very, very cautious when he fights, and he just hasn't shown the offense throughout his career. And when he gets into bigger fights, we still don't really see a lot of offense, and I don't think that's going to change much for him. He'd just be kind of a difficult guy to look good against, but his ceiling's also capped. Pedraza, I think, like you described, he looked good against Molina Saturday night. He looked good against Lespierre, but I don't know what we're talking about here. I don't mean to be picking on Jose Pedraza because I do like him, and he looked good in his last two fights, but I don't even know why we're really getting Jose Pedraza main events. I mean, he should be a guy at best on some kind of co-feature, on an undercard, unless he's fighting a star. I mean, and like you said, he's just a couple fights removed from losing to Zepeda, so to be building him up and highlighting on a main event, it's nothing against him. He's a solid fighter. He might be an okay opponent for another top guy, probably falling short, I would say. But, I can't see really, that to me is when Top Rank does stuff like that, that's to me where you get into questions about the depth of the stable. Again, not picking on Jose Pedraza, but I just don't get that. And like you were kind of alluding to also, Chris, I mean, ultimately, really, when you think of guys at 140 pounds, if you weren't having all these promotional divisions and things like that, I mean, he's not beating Josh Taylor. He's not beating Regis Prograis. And, really, he's not beating Jose Ramirez. He's really not even coming close to beating these guys. So, what's it really about? That's to me kind of, where things get a little bit watered down. And it's not because Pedraza's a bad fighter. He looked good in these last two fights, but it's part who he's fighting. And, I just don't know exactly what it's about. And then we're raving about him. It's a little bit of odd use of time and resources, really.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. So Boots Ennis got a nice little highlight uppercut in there, having to go to 10-ounce gloves because of the overweight of Abreu. F.A. kind of looking his own stiff self, and then when he puts his punches together, you go, well, that's what he's got. Is there any of these undercards that you want to talk about? I kind of want to hear your thoughts on Boots, because obviously he's got some litigation to figure out before I believe he'll get a big fight. But as far as a prospect, basically I think you got to call him just what he's shown, a contender in a sense. He may not have great wins or anything, but he's a fun fighter to watch. He's kind of on his toes in and out, but yet he'll put his punches together. He'll mix them up. He's got fast hands. I'm wondering exactly where his defense is, because sometimes, man, that upper body movement is real nice. Other times, like in the highlight reel uppercut, he gets clipped. Where are you at with Boots? And then we can talk about King Tug, because I know you've had some things to say about him in the past.
Yeah, I want to talk about Boots, and because I had been really high on a jog, but I do want to address that. But first with Boots Ennis, I liked him getting the stoppage. I like the way he's aggressive. He was extremely fast. His jab was really good, and he's got power. I've always liked his power coming up to this point. The only thing I didn't like about what he did Saturday night, which could be something in the future that can matter, is because, Abreu is no defensive specialist by any means. He was very inaccurate with his power shots before he landed that beautiful uppercut. And, the uppercut, of course, showed he's got that power. And when he does land flush, I mean, guys are going to go out, and you just really love watching the guy. I love his aggression, and he gets people out of there. Overall, I give him good grades on his performance on the whole. But the thing that troubled me watching it really through up until he landed that big uppercut was he was actually very inaccurate with his power shots. And sometimes that can be a vulnerability as a fighter's career goes on because, accuracy is one of the most underrated attributes. And, even if a guy's got a lot of power or speed, but he's inaccurate, and just gets better opposition, and those shots just aren't landing where they should be or not landing at all. That can catch up to a fighter. So that's something I'm looking for, hopefully for his sake, correction on. And if he doesn't correct it, it could be a vulnerability. But a lot of good things. Ennis is a fun guy to watch. The way things are nowadays, even with who he's fought, I mean, I liked him being on a PBC show because PBC has all the top welterweights for the most part. Of course, outside of Terrence Crawford and, maybe, I think, Virgil Ortiz is getting ready to be on that level. But, I think he's ready for a real contender. You might not want to see him just yet go right to, in theory, not that he will, fighting the top like Spence or Crawford, even though that won't happen promotionally. But hey, the other contenders, yes, let's get to it. Let's see it. Let's see what he's got. I really do enjoy watching him fight. I was glad to see him on a PBC card, considering they have all the welterweights, and him to get a big knockout. I like the way I always like fighters like Ennis, who he's fighting a guy like Abreu. He's not playing around, going for the stoppage, trying to be impressive. I'm always partial. I really like to see that out of fighters. That's one of the things I look for, and he's definitely one of those guys. All you got to do is look at his KO percentage. On the other hand, F.A. Ajagba, a guy that I had been really high on, he decided to make a promotional and a trainer switch, which concerned me for a lot of reasons. His exposure, because I actually thought, even though he got dropped in that wild fight with Kalaji and he didn't look as good against Kojanu, he still did stop him. I thought he was on track. And he had to split with Ronnie Shields. Ronnie Shields, a good trainer, and moved to Kake Coroma. But I didn't like what I saw in this fight. He was in with a guy that wasn't in the win, granted, Rice. But like you said, Chris, I mean, he was just kind of not even with any spirit throwing a 1-2. And I could see where Shields had him working on other punches. And, I thought he was making progress there. I think you saw a lot of that, even though Desmarian went the distance with him. That guy's good, and he came to fight. Much better opponent than we all expected. Ended up being good for Ajagba, but he had to go a tough distance fight, and I thought you saw better punch selection. We saw none of that Saturday night. It was what I feared for him, and I'm not just saying it because he's with Top Rank now. I'm just saying because he made the trainer switch. It's just something that kind of taken him off track. I mean, there he is on ESPN Plus. He went from the action card of the year on Fox in December, where you had that Balderas upset loss. You had the Ajagba, Kalaji, and then you had Harrison, Charlo 2, a tremendous card on regular network TV, and then the guys on ESPN Plus fighting underneath Jose Pedraza. I mean, how can you be a big heavyweight prospect and fighting below Jose Pedraza? To me, that doesn't make sense, even in boxing 2020. It's still a heavyweight that people have seen on Fox, and then to have a performance like that where he looked like he regressed, just a really bad night for Ajagba.
And he's been a little uneven, Sometimes you see it and you're like, oh, I see it. Okay, yep, And then the next fight, but I did like how he was getting rounds, like you mentioned. And that's something he needs fully,
Yeah, but I didn't like, he's not going to be, I mean, you want guys to have some skills to defend themselves, if you get hurt in a fight and you got to survive that type of thing. But Ajagba, his background amateur-wise, wasn't so deep that, I mean, he's never going to become a slick boxer. So,
Right.
You know, let's have him go out and try to destroy its heavyweight, and you know, use that height, and he's got the power. He's shown the legit power. You know, this guy's not going to be a boxer. I mean, so you know, to poke around with the jab against this Rice guy who was just in to survive. I mean, you know, Chris, how like the old trainers would say and stuff, and there's still a truth to it. I mean, you know, if the guy's looking for a way out of there, give him a reason to get out of there. In other words, if Rice doesn't want to be there, you know,
give him a ticket out of town.
Start laying some hammers on him and give him an excuse to get out of there. But Jogba didn't do that, and then it ends up going the distance. So and you know, fans don't want to see that. Let's face it. You know, it's heavyweights. You know, fans don't want to see that, especially from the heavyweights. So not a good outing. I'm just not sure where it's going right now. The whole plan for him.
Yeah, it did seem like when he was getting it together, he did start to attack the body more. But yeah, he gets hit with jabs and hooks, and it's the type where his head snaps, you know, and you're like, oh boy, he started to go up in levels. We'll see, but yeah, we'll see where he goes. We can talk a little King Tug if you want. Otherwise, I do kind of want your thoughts. Well, obviously prematurely, but just on the Canelo lawsuit stuff in general. I kind of want to get you to chime in on that. Obviously, we haven't seen the contract. Obviously, the first wave of it didn't go as well for obvious reasons. But well, let's talk a little bit about that maybe, and I won't take up that much more of your time, sir.
Yeah, no, we will. First on Tug, I like Tug. I didn't see how, even though Breedy showed a lot of heart and came to fight, I don't see how that was a split decision. I thought Tug clearly won it. You know, guy's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of skill. He's got the amateur pedigree. I think people are actually sleeping on him a little bit, underestimating him. I mean, losing to Gary Russell Jr. when you've had, 11 pro fights or whatever is no shame. And, I think he's a threat to anyone. Let's say Shakur Stevenson's not going to fight at featherweight anymore. He's a threat to anyone at featherweight outside of Gary Russell Jr. So I think that, he's got the power. He's got the amateur pedigree. He just has moments where he takes his foot off the pedal a little bit. That's his one flaw. Breedy's got a lot of heart, but, he's going to be, even at featherweight, he's going to be a little small and underpowered. He doesn't have the power. He's a fun guy to watch. He's got a lot of heart, but I think it's going to be tough for him because, he doesn't have the power, and Tug didn't have to respect his power. But I think King Tug is a threat to anybody that's currently fighting at featherweight outside of Gary Russell. And PBC's got a lot of guys now in that 122, 126-pound range. I'd like to see him, put all these guys together. Some of these guys we're talking about on undercards, instead of them fighting lesser opposition, let's have some of these guys take each other on. That's something that's there for PBC at welterweight, which they've had a lot of them fight at welterweight, in fairness. It's there for them at featherweight, too, and they just did have Tug and Russell fight, and I thought that was an underrated matchup going in, and, Russell showed his skill. So keep doing that. Let's keep seeing these guys fight each other. I think there's a lot of great fights to be made there. Now, getting on to the Canelo litigation, I have been following it, haven't read the entire complaint. I have, looked at parts of it, and I do litigate, so it's in litigation, but it's in the contract setting. My litigation is usually not centered around contractual matters as much. That's more of a transactional type thing. I do more of your discrimination-based type litigation, but I'm litigating all the time. And, the procedural dismissal might be a little overrated. It might not be that big of a deal in the long run. The Canelo's attorneys obviously were making a strategic decision where they wanted to get the case in federal court in California. But, it looks to me, what I think is interesting, like you said, we don't know exactly what the contract said, but I think what would probably be interesting to the boxing fans is when I'm reading into this, litigating and looking at the strategy, and even though Golden Boy is not talking that way, it seems to me that this can't be anything other than trying to get away from Golden Boy in the midst of this controversy over the DAZN deal. So, DAZN's tied with Golden Boy, and there's that deal between DAZN and Golden Boy. But looks to me like Canelo wants out. I think that it's probably an attempt to get to some number between Canelo, DAZN, and Golden Boy, where Canelo maybe gets some money and gets out of this thing. But, Golden Boy, you mentioned him earlier, they've got Ryan Garcia, who's an up-and-coming star, but Canelo is the biggest star in boxing right now. It legitimately could be the case that Golden Boy just can't afford to lose Canelo. So, I mean, I don't think Canelo is going to be – I don't think it's one of these deals where, like we've seen with Mikey Garcia, that I think that people are looking at, like where he's going to be looking at sitting, fighting this out for a really long period of time and sitting out. Litigation does take a long time. That's one of the unfortunate things about litigation. But I think this all looks to me like an attempt by Canelo to leverage things to maybe come away with some money from DAZN and just getting away from Golden Boy. Whether he's going to be able to pull that off or not, that's what litigation's about and what all the strategy and the chess moves are. And I do know a lot about, because this is coming up more in litigation. I don't like it. I think it threatens the right to jury trial. But these arbitration agreements, in Canelo's case, it could be more argued that, with his deal, it's a sophisticated consumer and he knows what he's doing, even though he's a fighter with his people. But Golden Boy, we don't know for sure, but they're saying there's an arbitration clause too, which would mean the dispute between Canelo and Golden Boy can't be even in federal court. It's got to be an arbitration instead. I don't like these arbitration agreements, but like them or not, more and more of them are being upheld. So you could have that factor where then it's got to get thrown into an arbitration. But I think it looks to me like the end game is that Canelo's trying to get out of this deal and maybe just get some money. Obviously he and his people know he's not going to get the entire amount of the contract without fighting. So it doesn't make any sense. So, but that's just a leverage thing. So it's going to be some number between zero and the entire contract number, and Canelo trying to get away from Golden Boy is where he wants this to end up, and DAZN probably does at this point too. But where does Golden Boy, want their relationship with the Canelo to end up? They probably don't want it to end, and that's where if their strategy could be to drag it out, and if Canelo's got to sit out, he's losing a lot of money, but we can't forget either Canelo's also made a lot of money. So, with the money he's made, you got to say even with the money he has made, some of the reason of him still fighting has got to be pride. So, he does want to fight. But it's going to be interesting. But it would seem to me that this is the beginning of the end of the Canelo Golden Boy relationship. And we should add, Chris, because this actually was out there in reputable stories and on Twitter within the last week or so. He can't interfere with contract, but Stephen Espinosa did straight out say and was quoted that he has high interest in Canelo and that they had a past contractual relationship and he would be interested in resuming that if Canelo is a free agent. I thought that was worthy of note.
Yeah, and even the Yildirim thing where, that promoter said, I got Al Heyman and he, him and Showtime have $20 million. We're ready to win this purse bid. And I also think that is a way to prove, a lot of people are like, why is he doing this Yildirim thing? But isn't that proving that he's ready to fight? Speaking of reports, John, we found out that Canelo was willing to take a 30% cut, but DAZN wanted 50%. So he was actually willing. I mean, just fighting, he's going to take a pay cut because of lack of the live gate, obviously. He does a good $8 million every time out. But so he was already saying, dude, I'll meet you 30% or whatever. We don't know if that's the exact thing. But that is the reports from Kopp and Raphael and a couple other folks. But that kind of blows my mind because ultimately you guys did sign him for this crazy $35 million every time. And you guys, from what we know, it's Oscar and Golden Boy that make the money on the gate, and they're not in. That part of it is a different deal than, say, Floyd and Showtime because he was independent. Is that Yildirim thing literally saying, hey, because we found out that he did ask Golden Boy to try to go to a network and get me a fight. They, I don't know, allegedly didn't. And they also allegedly, this is what Canelo's saying, that the agreement that they have in the premier opponent thing between Golden Boy and DAZN, how, he's like, wait a second, what's going on here? I'm stuck in between. So they are stopping him from fighting. And he also did say that he would fight Golovkin next. They get so much so that they got the money figured out, according to a couple of reports too. So DAZN did ultimately get their Golovkin fight, maybe too late, of course. But hey, if they say that it was going to come in September, that's what they told us to the press. And it's not like, Oscar came out and a variety of other people came out and said no, because Oscar's not afraid to express himself on there. But is this Yildirim thing saying, hey, here's another, I have $20 million sitting here. My services are here. I can fight. I want to fight, but for some reason, this little in-between game that I have nothing to do with, well, I have something to do with, but as far as putting pen to paper, a lot of this is alleged, obviously, but where do you find that? That seems to be the crux of the issue right there. The premium opponent, the supposed, allegedly, he tried to say, hey, I need to see the agreement. They wouldn't do it, so, he said, all right, here's a lawsuit.
Yeah, I think that I apparently what's come out now too is that, or wasn't talked about as much, is that technically the contract is between DAZN and Golden Boy, and then Canelo is like a Golden Boy employee, so to speak, in it. Now, I think what's happening here is, my read on it is, because of the pandemic and the way boxing hasn't gone, we could have seen this. A lot of people who watched a lot of boxing and followed the business side could have told them, but DAZN thought that they could, somehow make this Canelo deal work at the numbers they were talking, and they can. I think that Canelo wants out of this deal, and so does DAZN. That's my read. I think you got 2 to 3 parties that want out, and Golden Boy is reliant on that money. Right, they're reliant on that money from DAZN for the rest of the guys that they're giving him, which outside of Ryan Garcia and Virgil Ortiz, and they don't have a lot of people for those two to fight, is not much. I do think that the Yildirim thing is definitely part of the maneuvering, and that, I think, gets into a little more of the boxing politics part. Let's face it, Yildirim's appeared on a few PBC cards recently, and the first year or so of PBC, I liked this part of it when they were anti-alphabet organization. Remember how they weren't even mentioning the alphabets during the initial network broadcast? I personally love that. Right. But then all of a sudden something changed around the time of the Danny Garcia-Roberto Guerrero fight, where that became for a WBC belt. And all of a sudden WBC was all over the telecast, and I could see something had shifted. And I think, and I don't think that they know their business. I don't think it was necessarily the way to go, but apparently PBC and the WBC decided it would be mutually beneficial to start doing some working together. So, when Canelo, which you got to laugh, let's face it, when the WBC board of directors voted 31-1 or whatever that Canelo and Yildirim should be fighting for their 168-pound belt, I mean, you had to laugh. But I think you're analyzing it right. It's all part of the maneuvering, and I think it is sort of the Canelo side of things. With obviously, PBC is on Showtime. Steven Espinosa has already said he's had interest. There's kind of saying, hey, maybe this is a way to work your way in, to just say that the WBC is, you have to laugh at all the alphabets, that the WBC under the guise of being an independent sanctioning body is ordering this fight. And like you pointed out, Chris, Canelo saying, I want to fight. It's about, again, for the purposes of litigation, all of a sudden, it's about belts, and we really care about these titles, and I need to be able to fight for that, and this is an independent organization, and
I've got a second option. I have an option that they're not allowing me to take.
Right, and they're willing to put this fight on. At the very, very least, where Canelo could get some money for fighting Yildirim, and somebody else could put it on. I mean, you could even maneuver it for DAZN making an exception to the contract. But again, you know, Golden Boy, obviously, you know, there is a lot of bad blood there between, you know, Al Heyman left, you know, Golden Boy, and a lot of fighters went with him, and you know that bad blood has seemed in boxing. We've seen all these things repaired when money comes up, but we haven't. There has been a little bit. I mean, Diaz fought Gary Russell Jr. on Showtime, but there seems to be a lot of bad blood between Golden Boy and PBC generally. So there may be an exception here and there, but what I'm saying is, you know that they don't want to work with PBC on Canelo and Yildirim, and DAZN probably doesn't really want to allow that, unless again they may be looking to get out of this deal.
Right.
So we'll see, but I have a feeling that Canelo wants out of the deal, and so does DAZN, and we'll see how the contract works with Golden Boy there, and how this all plays out. Probably will end up in some kind of settlement where Canelo gets away. It's just going to be a question of how long it takes.
One more quick one. What are the odds, because I think this was in the lawsuit too, that he's trying to get like an injunction or injuncture? I don't know the terms you do. But, you know, to say, hey, what are the chances that he could fight while the litigation plays out? It seems kind of like, really? They'd allow that? What do you think he could get a judge to rule that favor? Like, hey, why we figured this out? Or you think that, hey, the contract's pretty locked into, we have an option, like you said, and that is to kind of figure it out, arbitration?
Yeah, I'm going to guess that I'm going to guess, I don't know. I'm going to guess the contract would be too tight, but you got the right idea, Chris. Yeah, be an injunction. It would be kind of the idea just that we're talking about, like, let's say, which really this stuff is happening. You know, the WBC, again, this is all boxing politics, but the WBC orders Canelo Yildirim, which they already had their vote on, and you know, says it's got to go to purse bid or something like that. And then Canelo, just like you pointed out, is basically with his legal team is saying, hey, you know, we got to be allowed to fight, make money. I want to fight. These guys won't let me fight. I would have fought Yildirim for them. They didn't allow it. You know,
this is America line. Hey, this is America. We can work.
You got to let me fight, make money. But I'm gonna guess, and I don't know, but I'm gonna guess that the contract's too tight, and the judge wouldn't issue any kind of injunction. This you know, I mean, to help Canelo. I mean, you know, they might get a ruling the opposite, that he can't fight, you know, while they're settling this, because you know, say DAZN's going to be, or actually Golden Boy is going to be too damaged, you know, if he's allowed to fight or something like that.
Sure.
So yeah, we'll see, but it's got to get back going, and we got to see if there's going to be arbitration. Now, arbitration in theory, if there is an arbitration clause, arbitration in theory, I don't like it, but it's supposed to move quicker. That's part of the concept of arbitration. It's supposed to be less expensive and move quicker. You know, I think you lose too much with it, but that's supposed to be the concept of it. So if there is an arbitration clause, we don't. We've seen talk that there is one, but I don't think that's for certain yet. There's been talk that there's a arbitration clause in the Golden Boy Canelo contract, but I don't know that for sure at this point, which would mean it can't be in litigation in federal court. It has to be decided in private arbitration otherwise, but we haven't seen that for sure. I will tell you the way litigation goes, if that does exist, as soon as this gets refiled, the first responsive pleading from the defense, Golden Boy's lawyers, would basically be a motion to dismiss based on the arbitration agreement, motion to dismiss and motion to compel arbitration.
Sure. And like you said, though, as far as Golden Boy and their company, sure, Ryan Garcia might be able to really blow up, and we know Ortiz skill-wise seems like he's going to be there, but in a stock division, of course. But you know, from that discovery with the Heyman Golden Boy lawsuit, we found out just how valuable Canelo is to their bottom line. And would they just go bankrupt? Would they, if things started working, going south, would they just be like, all right, Bankrupt, I got to shut this thing down, because they can't exist really at any kind of high level without Canelo at this moment.
Yeah, I'm going to take a guess as possible, because the problem they've got, Chris, with Ryan Garcia and Virgil Ortiz is these guys can really fight. I actually am a believer in Ryan Garcia, even though a lot of people seem to not like him. I'm a believer in Virgil Ortiz too, but here's the problem, and this is the problem I thought from the beginning with the DAZN thing. I mean, even with boxing in general shrinking, the fan base from what it used to be, still, as much as it may have shrunk, when these guys are fighting on DAZN, relatively speaking, nobody's seeing these guys. So, if Canelo had been, on HBO, on Showtime, all the pay-per-views, that's a base that DAZN gets to live off as long as they're living in boxing. That their own guys, so to speak, the guys who are younger and coming up more with them since they've started with boxing, those guys just haven't been seen. They haven't been seen enough.
Yeah.
So there's nothing really to fall back on.
If you don't have an opponent, that's what Al Heyman did really well. And if I'm going to invest in a division, I'm going to have opponents.
Yeah, it's of course it's because he's got more guys, but still the other guys could get that. I mean, Heyman seems to get that now. Top Rank very recently, and it's funny because it's not really their history either. Even though they did promote Ali and Old Foreman, but not a lot of other guys at heavyweight. They're signing heavyweights. People pointed out, I agree, but again, yeah, I know they're going to say we just signed him and stuff, but still, here to me is where you get into the problem is, so you got Ajagba signed, and you sign some of these other heavyweights, and then Ajagba's fighting, Rice. I mean, it like that to me, it seems like that's the thing with Top Rank. Like, then not that a lot of people cared, but they've signed Kubrat Pulev, and then when he's fighting on their shows, they're bringing in nondescript opponents for him to fight. In other words, they just won't put these guys together, and the fans, they don't want to see a lot of these other fights. I mean, I know a lot of people like him as a workman type fighter, but to me, he really has lost to anybody upper level he's ever fought. I mean, is Carlos Takam that dangerous? That dangerous of a fighter? This is where I would disagree with a lot of people who they're clutching their pearls whenever there's a matchup. I mean, maybe Ajagba gets motivated. If he's in with Carlos Takam next, and Top Rank's got him signed and Ajagba, and he looks good. He gets by Takam and he looks good, and then all of a sudden people are looking at him differently. I mean, rather than fighting under Pedraza, fighting this Rice guy. I mean, if you're going to sign these heavyweights, put them in with each other. I think Heyman and PBC are doing that more, and they understood the fact that got to build up some depth. I've seen in recent years, I think it's maybe they're expanding it a little, but the guys actually signed to Top Rank just a few years ago. It was relatively speaking a very low number of total fighters. And that's where you can't make those matchups. So, if the PBC experiment is ultimately going to make it long term, one of the reasons is going to be just like you said is that Al Heyman knew we've got to get some depth, and he gets these guys fights, he keeps them fighting, and then it enables you to make these matchups, which that's where you don't see enough of that with the other promotional entities, really.
Right, and we're not saying that, some of these stay busy showcase Lara against Canelo's brother or whatever, there's plenty of that to go around, no doubt about it.
Yeah, that was awesome.
They all need right, exactly. Come on. But I'll say, if you're going to get good.
No, and then Lara Vendetti on a main event. I mean, Vendetti brought more than expected. He fought relatively tough, but that was a dull fight. Sure. And, you're putting that on a Fox main event. Sure, plenty. Don't get me wrong, plenty of mistakes to go around. There's opportunities that I definitely feel like PBC has missed as well, and those are two of the most glaring. You're right. You don't put Lara on in a Fox main event against Canelo's brother. I mean, that's Ramon Alvarez. I mean, just absurd. I mean, Lara's a skilled fighter, but we know he had a good fight with Hurd. He had a good fight with Angulo, but generally a lot of his fights haven't been entertaining. That. He's maybe the co-feature guy. You don't make him the main event guy. Like I said about Pedraza, not that Pedraza's dull aesthetically as Laura watching the fights, but these are not really guys to me that these are not main event guys unless they're in with somebody else totally A-list, that people really want to see the fight. And I do think that's where that some mistakes are made.
Yeah, and it'd be different if they brought in FA against Rice and then matched them up right away with somebody. That's what we'll find out. Well, I appreciate you taking time out, man. You have yourself a good night, all right? Enjoy the weekend, too. Lots of boxing on, that's for sure.
All right, Chris. Great show. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Really, really enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll be talking boxing soon.
Definitely, man. You take it easy. Have a good one. All righty. Definitely can learn a lot from that gentleman right there. And just in general, just to kind of clean some of this up, it was really with the FA thing, it was kind of back and forth. It was like, well, come on, dude. And then all of a sudden he shows that potential. But, man, he just gets hit with so many clean shots. I guess it was just a stale performance. And, this is his first fight with Top Rank, but even as the PBC, right? I mean, it's been kind of up and down. He was knocking dudes out. Then he went the distance. And as John said, I did kind of like some of those distance fights when he had to figure out something else. And so it did seem like it was pretty helpful. But we'll see. We'll see where he goes because he does have that power, no doubt about it. And like I said, I did like how he worked that body. Pause. And then we had Robesi Ramirez against Carabello. Carabello was a pressure fighter. He put in some decent body work. The jabs and the movement out of Ramirez was effective to an extent, but his power punching to me wasn't all that effective. And then he turned it up. He started really landing, I thought, some really strong punches. That uppercut, I think, in the 5th round kind of stood out to me. So he's kind of a work in progress. But, he outworked him. He outmaneuvered him. I mean, he was 52-11 after 2 punches. So it was clear by Ramirez. I still think Ramirez is just trying to get some of that amateur stuff out of his system. I don't think he looked as good as he did in his last fight. However, he was motivated because he had lost to the guy. And as we know, styles make fights. For me, I had it 9-1 Pedraza just to clean some of that up. I liked how he was throwing combinations to the body. I like how he mixes his punches up. He's on his toes. He's in and out. 2 of his best rounds actually against Gervonta were on the inside. Working the body with the uppercut, sometimes in the body into the head. I thought he was pretty sharp. That jab to the stomach, I thought that stood out too. He's really good at that. He's a good fighter. He's a very good fighter. Javier Molina just didn't have much to go on that. I'll tell you what, though. Brady getting knocked down early like that in the first 2 rounds was an overhand right at the end of the round. That King Tug, it was a fun fight right away too. But that King Tug, was able to land on him, and then I think it was like a minute in, several right hands, and I think a left hook knocked him down again. But then I gave Brady the 5th. Or I'm looking at the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. He was landing the better shots. His work rate got up. He was landing the better rounds. Now, there were some close rounds like the 6th. I gave that to him, too. Or, no, actually, that's when I started giving it a tug. Now I'm looking at my scorecard now. And it seemed like the jab, the quick combination, King Tug kind of got on his shit again. You could see Brady's eye was starting to close. The jab, he followed up with a few straight right hands, a little jab body. So he pretty much took over. But then the 11th, he took the fight back, I should say. But I think I'm looking at my scorecard. The 11th, behind the jab, the bigger shots I thought were Cree again. So, kind of in and out with the jab in the 12th round, kick tug. I had it like 7-5, 6-6. Obviously, those knockdowns were the difference. 190 to 166, pretty active fight. I mean, look at Brady, 742, still landed 22%. That's not horrible. 580 as far as thrown. But yeah, I thought John hit it on the nose as far as laying off the pedal a little bit. I think he kind of fell to that. But he is a good fighter, and especially the amount of fights he has. I thought he actually showed. Let's see an example. Maybe against Russell. I'm going down that line. Maybe Lipinets against Garcia, where you're like, oh, actually, dude, it's been a while since that many clean shots. Not a ton, not enough to win 4 or 5 rounds on Garcia, but you kind of looked at him like, all right, dude, Lipinets is a real deal. I thought he fought really well at that 140 pound, and so I want to see Brady, dude. I want to see both of them, obviously. So yeah, that's one of them. What else we got? Oh yeah, as far as I mean, Boots, that uppercut was nasty. I thought he was a little bit more accurate than John was saying, personally. But that was more of the jab and the quick little punches. So I guess, that is kind of a point there. But he landed 39% of his overall punches. But he did say his power punches. I just love how Boots mixes up everything, dude. He's right there for you, but he's still on that edge of the pocket where he can use an angle, miss the incoming punch, and then bam, he's right on your ass, and he's following up. That's what I really like about Boots. He's slick, like I said, on his toes, quick feet, quick hands. Looks like he's got a ton of power. I just like the way he mixes up his punches, man, and we can only go so far with this 26-0, I think now, 24 KOs. The dude is, you talk about an eye test, I mean, this guy is pretty much the definition of an eye test. I'm not saying he's fought just dudes that have no chance. I mean, this dude never got stopped. But at some point, I just hope he gets through this litigation because Espinoza said, and this is just obvious with boxing, once you get to this level, especially when you're knocking guys out the way he's doing it, it's just such a high risk, low reward. And I know people hate to hear that, but that's just factual, dude. They are running a business here, And if you're not going to be able to get that kind of, payday, there's just not going to be. You're going to get opponents later in the thing. But I did like how he isn't just on Showbox, how he got on a normal card. I hope maybe he can end up on one of these pay-per-view cards at some point, or even like a Showtime special edition. So there's a little bit more money in it maybe, so they can get a quality opponent. Hopefully they can. I mean, they just got to start early. They got to start early, dude, and just start knocking on doors. So, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But other than that, Lubin, yeah, I mean, I had him winning most of the rounds, of course. But it was a slow fight. He was a little bit too careful. Patient at times and effective. Then other times it was like, well, where'd that left hand to the body go? But like I said, it's really easy for us. He was looking for counter rights as well. Same with Gauthier. But it's real easy for us to sit here and say, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. Why aren't you showing more offense? And then look what happened when he did open up more. He buzzed him in the 10th round heavy and got some clean shots off there. I thought the 9th and the 10th were Gauthier and not too many other. I was 9-3. I just thought Lubin could have stepped it up a little bit earlier in that fight. But like I said, when you're in that mode, you're like, dude, I'm right there on the cusp of a big fight. I'll say this about where I want Lubin to go, and I don't give two shits about belts. So this is why I'm saying this. I know the WBC is the green belt, right? I know it. I know it's historic, and it's got Floyd and Ali on it and Tyson. I know all that stuff. But I would let's say Charlo beats Rosario. A lot of people think that, right? He'll have 3 belts. He's not going to hang on to those belts long. I mean, that's usually how these unifications, and especially undisputed, happen. if there's a division to open it up at on this roster, why not open it up right here? And instead of Lubin, who still needs a little bit higher of a top-level Hurd or whatever, Lara or Castano or whatever. I mean, they got a bunch of them. Harrison, let him get another win or two. Let them drop the WBC. And I only say the WBC because the ranking, he's the mandatory now. So, or he hasn't, let me take that back. He's not, the mandatory hasn't been called yet. So, maybe that'll be the thing where who knows how they do it. I'm worried about the fights, not the belts. So even if I know people don't like the interim strap or they drop, why does Charlo have to drop the belt? Well, do you want to see Lubin and Charlo? The rematch right now? You think Lubin's ready for him? I say no. Now, if he gets out of the opening rounds, could he win the fight? Sure, maybe, but especially with an aggressive, even a more aggressive Charlo 3 years later, sure. But why not let him, just for his own confidence, just so my point is, there's no momentum for it at all. And why would there be? He got dusted in the first round, and he doesn't have another. Let him get a big win against Hurd or Harrison or whatever. We can go down the list at 154. Let him get a win or two, get him up. Okay, let's say he beats one of these guys. Okay, then get another thing. And then all of a sudden you go, you know what? I'm looking at this. And Charlo was down 6-4 against Harrison until he knocked him out. So, and then Jackson, a couple years back, gave him problems. Some people think Harrison did win the first fight. So you could, now you got something to sell. And also, I just think it's a better fight at that time. So that's what I hope happens. I know it's the green belt. I know the great Muhammad Ali's on there. Pretty boy and money. Mayweather's on there. I got it. I get it. I understand this stuff, but I just don't give two shits about the WBA or the Super WBA or the interim. Everyone's got a belt, even when they're not even calling it like an interim. I mean, you see these silver belts, they're walking around with big belts on them. They look like real belts. It's kind of funky. Actually, what's his toes from the NBA? Dame was out there. Lillard was out there going, the only thing I don't like about boxing is I don't get the belt. Everyone's got a belt, like everyone. It is kind of funky, especially when they look like the real. It's not that, international, intercontinental. It's not some random. I don't know. Anyway, that's what I hope. I don't think that there's much. Who wants to see Lubin against Charlo right now? I mean, really. If they put that fight out, they would get smashed online. They'd be, what the fuck? Here we go again, And that's why I try not to get caught up in these belts because this is what it produces sometimes. Or sometimes, I will say this. We are starting to see in some divisions or some belts that they are, or the WBO actually putting PBC fighters there now. So that's cool. And some of these rankings are getting a little better, but in the end, the ranking systems, and it's great that the IBF is strong on their Mando, but if it's just a so-so Mando, and you look at the rankings, and Sean Porter loses to Kell Brook and gets knocked out of the top 15 in the IBF, that's great that you're tough with your rankings, or not your rankings, but you're tough with your Mando, but why you got to do Porter like that? And he's back in there, but you know what I mean? So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. I'm going to go ahead and go to the line here. I see Carcino. I'm going to drop in real quick. What's going on, Carcino? How the hell are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm hanging in there.
All right. Well,
got a little summer cold coming. The change of weather.
I bet you we got some sort of LeBron video coming soon, huh? Tonight.
Yeah, he's probably responsible for it. Yeah, we're going to probably get that after the game. We're going to have a post game.
Yep. I like that idea with the post game. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, the StreamYard, letting the people get in there and just rant.
Right.
That actually works out pretty well, letting the guys go. Except for they'll keep it going for hours and hours. It's like it's nonstop. It just continuously goes. But, yep. like, as soon as I broke the news to you about Floyd coming out the next day,
Dude.
there it was.
Unbelievable. That actually, let me take that back. It is not unbelievable because you've done that plenty of times on the show. But that was like clockwork, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I was like, we don't know who the opponent is yet. But it's happening like New Year's Eve. And sure enough, they made the announcement. Well, they didn't officially make an announcement. It got leaked.
Right.
As they finalized the deal. So now it's Logan Paul, and it makes sense. You know, it's another, you know, Conor McGregor type.
Mm-hmm.
It should do a lot of numbers for exhibition. It's going to make a lot of pay-per-view. Oh, yeah.
That press conference is going to be funny. I don't care if anyone, you know, whoever's not going to buy this or not, you're going to watch the press conference.
Yeah, and they're going to want to see the fight and see what happens. And I'm like, oh, boy, here we go. So it's going to be another easy check for Floyd. And at this point, people are like, yeah, but he ain't fighting no real fighters. I'm like, the real fighters are not fighting real fighters.
Well, speaking of some real fights. Oh, go ahead. What are you going to say?
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, speaking of some real fights, the Charlo brothers are back in town. The boys are back in town. They got some interesting fights here. Charlo, Daravanchenko, if you look at the books, it's close to a 50-50. A lot of people thought, or a fair amount of people thought he beat Golovkin, or at least it was right there 6-6, and the knockdown gave Golovkin whatever it is. He fought really well against Danny Jacobs. The knockdowns kind of turned that thing. That's kind of the Daravanchenko thing. Takes him a little while to warm up. He makes a nice little run, and then he gets hurt. He either starts to wear down or gets hurt. He didn't wear down, though, against Golovkin. He did take punishment, though, and he's taken even against Cloquet here in Minneapolis at the Armory. He was winning that fight, got hurt, ended up winning it and finishing okay. But he just has too many lulls where he actually gets hurt. For me, I'm going with Charlo. But what do you think? How do you think these are going to play out? Charlo Daravanchenko and Charlo Rosario. Some people think with the Rosario, it's going to be over in 6 rounds. Others think, well, dude, this guy's getting full camps now. He's got some power. You know, Jermell is a lot more aggressive nowadays, which puts him in range to get hit by a guy that can, some crack some. How do you see these 2 fights breaking down? Who's going to win them?
I got Daravanchenko beating Jamal Charlo. I think Jamal Charlo is another person who, depends. He telegraphs a lot of his punches, and he depends on power. But Daravanchenko, if he can survive the early onslaught, which I think he can, he's going to surprise Jamal Charlo. He might even stun him enough to get a knockdown. But I think the consistency, the punches from different angles, I think he's going to win on the cards and get robbed. And they're going to say Jamal Charlo edges him out in a majority decision or the majority split, like one in each.
Right.
They'll want to have Daravanchenko winning and want to have Charlo winning, and they'll split it. So I think, split decision, and they can call it that way. So it'll come down to that.
So a good
because
two-way fight, but you'll walk away thinking Daravanchenko should have won the fight.
Exactly. Just like the Triple G. It probably won't be as worse as Triple G was. I mean, Triple G was kind of obvious that he lost that fight. And Charlo, I just don't see Jamal Charlo. He hasn't really fought any competition, really. And the competition that he fought, that you could be able to breathe through, guys who were like feather-fisted in there with him at middleweight were taking him to distance. And I'm like, man, he couldn't even finish the guy. And then he telegraphed it. His chin is way in the air. he has no defensive skills. You could land right hands on him all night, but that left is going to come. As soon as he's looking, he's not even going to be seeing the left. He's going to be so telegraphed and trying to land that big right hand on Daravanchenko. He's going to get caught with the left. And once Jamal is caught with that left, we're going to see how he responds when it's consistently happening. And the body punches. Daravanchenko throws very sneaky body shots. He hurt Triple G with a body shot.
Yes, he did.
Surprised him.
A couple times.
Yeah, surprised him. And he knows he's got great timing on when to throw the body shot. He's more of a headhunter than he was a body puncher, but he's underrated, I think, with his body punch because it's very sneaky. And he makes it and sells it as if he's going up top, then come to the body. And I think he's going to give Jamal a very high-speed education when it comes to fighting world-class talent. When you've been, stuck in the same house fighting a bunch of, spare parts that Al Heyman is throwing at you. Now you're fighting some real fighters because Jamal hasn't fought anyone at middleweight. Since he's been at middleweight, he hasn't fought any competition whatsoever. Guys who've been out for 2 years have been beating him up. And I'm like, this guy's not ready. But they promote it like they're the big ticket. They're the big show because they're twins. It's pitiful. It's really pitiful. They have digressed. They have shown no progress of getting better over all these years. They're what you would call paper champions. Him and his brother. Now,
I think Mel has gotten better at coming forward, though, than, let's say, flashback 4 years ago against Jackson. But you're right, though, about Maul at 160 as far as the comp. You have Korobov, and then there's really not much there. It's been light, no doubt about it. And his power doesn't look the same as it was at 54, no doubt.
Yeah, and then Karloff was off for 2 years. So that's what I'm saying. Karloff came off 2 years and basically won the fight. Was landing the big right hands, was taking him to school. I'm like, imagine if he had some actual, a camp. He just took it for the check. Now, Rosario and Jermell, that's a whole different ticket because Mel is a little different. Mel is more the boxer, but now he's becoming the boxer puncher. But now I can't trust Jermell. I just watched him in a fight where he got totally outboxed and outclassed by Tony Harrison, but he was able to score 2 knockdowns and stop the fight. But I saw him more aggressive than I've seen him in any fight he's ever been in that fight. And I'm like, why is he throwing all of these big shots? He was throwing a lot of big punches early. And normally when you fight in a fight where you're like, okay,
really,
you knock the guy down. Well, both of the fights, yes, but the first fight was different. He was throwing big punches, and then they weren't landing. Then he gassed out and got tired, and then was getting worked out with a jab in his face all night, and it was just Olay. This time he was throwing head punches, and I got a knockdown, and he started throwing a lot of heavy punches, and he was starting to fatigue. He's trying to get a second win. Then we have whatever happened in the corner with these water bottles. Now, that brought a lot of questions. That brought in Panama Lewis. It brought up everything in the world. I've watched it again, and I'm still in disbelief. I interviewed the California State Athletic Committee about it. He seemed very confused about anything. It seems like he's just going to stick to the script that they gave him on paper. And he can't even explain what was the purpose of them switching the water bottle. Now, I'm like, I wish, because now he's thinking about making an entire rule change based on that. He's
Wasn't
like, well,
the difference
I didn't know.
Squirt bottle in a cap, a squirt bottle in a cap? Wasn't that the difference?
Well, no, the thing was this. Every corner has 30 bottles of water. They're approved. They got it for each corner, so you're not going to run out of water. You got 30 bottles in there in a 12-round fight. There's no way you're going to – everybody got a 30-pack. So You're not going to lose water in a 12-round fight. So they got the water that you would get in a water bottle, and they're giving them the water out of the water bottle. Now, around round 5, the water bottle is not given anymore. He's getting water or whatever type of fluid he's getting out of a squeeze bottle his uncle is administering. Before, his trainer, Derek James, was giving him water out of those water bottles for the first 4 rounds. And after, like, the 5th round, here comes old squeeze bottle that his uncle would do. And his trainer, Derek James, is not touching that bottle. That's very fishy to me. And then that happens for 4 rounds, and you think, okay, well, they switched to the water bottle because he wanted, to get more water, so they switched. So, all right, that makes sense. Then why did they go back to the original water after, like, round 8? They go back to the water bottle. This doesn't make sense. And Derek James is back giving him the water now. So if you're a person that's watching this, it looked like, okay, they gave him something to give him a pep in his step and bring him back. Now we got to dilute what we just gave him, so let's give him water now again so we can dilute and flush this out so it doesn't show up in his system. So
that's
brings
the key
a lot
thing. That's tough to – that's where it lays right there, whether, the belief is not is, if he did put something in his system, it's to have to take the test like 40 minutes later, an hour later, that's where I'm like, I don't know. It didn't show up in the test. I don't know. That's the only problem I have.
Water-based. A lot of things are water-based and don't show up on the test. That could boost your testosterone and get you back up. If you took a 5-hour energy drink, that might not show up on the test if you water it down.
Sure.
That could have been like what they use for asthma to open your lungs, like the same thing Panama Lewis was doing. That could not show up on the test. They probably used the same thing. We don't know. The thing is that happened, and that shouldn't have happened. That's too fishy in the corner. And the California State Athletic Committee told me that there's no rule saying that they had to inform the other corner of what they were approving in the other corner. I'm like, that's retarded. I'm like, don't you think that? I'm like, not only is that unfair, but if you make a change, that's dangerous. The other corner would need to know that. I'm like, now they're at risk. I'm like, you created this whole thing. You guys have NL, but I know he's defending his guy because his guy is looking right at it and said they got permission to use the water bottle earlier. So if they got permission before the fight started to use the water bottle, why was they using the water in the beginning, and why the trainer who administers the water wasn't giving him that water out of that bottle? It seems like he was covering his ass and said, I'm not touching that bottle.
And they claim to have watched them put the water in the bottle, right? That's what the commission claims?
Right, but they don't know what was in there before when they opened it, and that's what they're going to claim. Yeah. So they're not going to tell on themselves. They're not going to say, well, we dropped the ball.
No, there should be a rule in place. I think you're right about the rule in place regardless. Yeah,
right.
Just to take it out of the hands
of the people are going to be watching the corner. Now people are going to be watching the corner.
There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. What do you think, Rosario? You think Rosario has a chance here to maybe land something that wakes Charlo up and buzzes him and gets him out of there? Or like, how do you see Rosario? Rosario's a interesting cat. He's coming off a great performance against the guy that doesn't have the greatest chin, though.
Here's the thing. Rosario can punch, and he's got heavy hands, but he's very chinny himself. I see Jamel probably stopping him in like round 5 or 6, because what Jamel could do is he can land punches and then he can get out of the way pretty much. I say he's going to catch him early, probably daze him, and then Jamel could probably, get him out of there. I hope he catch Jamel with something that'll wake him up. But I just don't see Jamel losing this fight. I think think he's going to be really cautious and aware of the power. Then around 5 or 6 after he busts, the only way Rosario will catch him is Rosario is hurt, and then he rushes in and he actually catches Jermell. And that I don't like the way Rosario sets up his punches sometimes. I think he telegraphs everything because like so confident in his power, and that can get him very hurt in this business. One power shot and he's probably asleep.
Yeah, I'm right there with you as far as if he gets him hurt, if Charlo jumps on him too early, that could be the counter shot. I think you pinpointed that really well. As far as this last weekend, what did you think of Erickson Lubin's performance? You know, a lot of people on Twitter watching were like, dude, you're beating this guy, you're better than this guy. I like the left hand to the body. I like some of the stuff you're doing, but you're not. You got to just put the work rate together and put the punches together and start to really one-side this guy. In the same breath, it seems like he's stuck between styles right now because of that Charlo fight first round. And lo and behold, in the 10th round, he ends up getting hurt. What are your thoughts on that? And then, I don't know, I think you were on before when I thought, you know, let's say Charlo wins and Lubin wins. Why not let Lubin get hurt or Harrison or one of the Castaño, Lara? Let him get one of these shots so we can actually anticipate more of the Lubin-Charlo rematch because that's what the WBC ranking-wise has it. But what do you think of Lubin overall against, you know, a crafty old vet that didn't really, after 5 rounds or so, didn't seem like there was much of a threat until the 10th round when there was. And I think I gave him the back-to-back rounds, 9th and 10th.
Well, I think that Lubin was trying to. He knew he was in there with a very heavy puncher, so he was very cautious. You know, when you've been knocked out, and you know you're kind of chinny, you know, and you fighting 2 big punchers. He showed a lot of boxing skills, but he wasn't going to do anything more or extra. He was trying to take Goucher to the later rounds and try to, you know, step it up a little bit. When he got caught, it's because he was basically looking. You know, he was falling asleep in the ring and got caught with a shot in the 10th round. But, you know, I thought he, you know, did well as coming back. You know, he showed like, okay, I can get buzzed and not panic and go down. He got cold. He caught cold in that fight with Jamal. And it showed, you know, that's Jamal's biggest win to date is Erickson Lubin. Let that sink in. His biggest win to date came with a guy who just basically had like 2 fights. So just let that sink in. This guy's been fighting for like 2012. It's like, are you serious? Undefeated.
The funny thing is, that was a 50-50 fight on the betting lines, too. It was a 50-50 fight on the betting lines.
And that's crazy. And the thing is, Lubin, you know, because they like, oh, this guy was great in the amateurs, you know, so they thought this was going to be a big fight and everything else, but he just happened to get caught. So now you're back into this thing where Lubin, they're trying to build him back up because that's what they do. PBC, to pacify boxing champions. That's what they're going to do, pacify everybody over there and keep them fighting each other in one big circle. But Jetson Rosario, man, I hope he can do something, but I really don't see it. And I don't see anybody paying $75 for this pay-per-view. I'm like, is there Mayweather or Pacquiao on this card? What, $75 for the pay-per-view? Are they insane? They must be insane because I don't know what soul on the face of this planet is going to pay $75 to see the Charlos. I swear. Like, are they rapping? Is there a performance? What am I getting for $75? Floyd Mayweather pay-per-view with McGregor wasn't even $75.
Yeah, it was. It was $100. But yeah, You don't think that there's some quality here with comparatively?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was at the movie theater, so yeah, I didn't.
Well, that's true too. That's actually. I was going to point that out. I do wish, obviously, the movie theater's in a mess right now overall in the States. So that does suck. This would have been a perfect time to pay $22 for this pay-per-view. But if you look at the last 10 years of pay-per-view, though, Carcino, with, the Canelo against Liam Smith, the Pacquiao against Rios, the stuff that did underachieve, if you look at some of the stuff, they are giving us a nice little 1-2 punch, I'll say that. We have a 50-50 fight. I mean, the whole pay-per-view thing, I wish it wasn't there in general, right? But if you look at bang for your buck, I understand that Charlos don't have a name brand to sell just yet, that's for sure, and they may never. I mean, this is going to be, the test right here. But I'll say value with a lineal title, whatever that means, but it is that. I know a lot of people don't like Rosario's in that spot, but he did beat the man that beat the man, whatever. A lot of people thought Jared Hurd would run Charlo over. So, we're here. And then a top, say, 4 middleweight, because Canelo and Jacobs is not a middleweight. That's pretty good, though. I mean, I can think of one card since then. It was and don't get me wrong, the names are nuts. But Mayweather Canelo and then a lineal with Garcia and Matisse. Is it just a name thing? Like, why are you trying to sell these guys on name? Because I think they are offering value when I compare the pay-per-views over the last 10 years.
I guess, but, I mean, I don't get it. I'm trying to think. Who's going to get excited to see the Charlos do anything? I mean, they don't put on an exciting fight to me at all, really. I mean, the last Jermell Charlo fight, that was with, and that was on Fox, the one when he fought Tony Harrison, the rematch. But Jamal hasn't fought anybody, and the fight we just talked about when he knocked out, I wouldn't say not Lubin, but
Harrison.
But no, when he knocked out J-Rock, that was his biggest win at their weight class, and then he went to middleweight, and it's been nothing ever since.
And I thought Trout gave him a better fight, but you're right at 160. His run at 160 is not.
At 160 in middleweight, he's done absolutely nothing. So I have not been impressed with any fight Jamal Charlo has had at middleweight. He's basically proven that he's not ready. He turned down a fight with Canelo. His team or the people representing him said no after he was offered huge money to take it, and he didn't take it. And that was basically it. After he did that, it's like, okay, well, you're not serious. You just here to try to be a star. And that's most of these guys, that's what they want. They want to be, like, famous more than they want to be known as the best fighter in the game. So they care about the fame, and that's all the Charlos are about. Well, how many hits did I get? How many likes did I get? You see how they're going crazy in the chat? That's them. So they stuck in that reality. They're not thinking world champions and fighting and boxing. Most fighters don't care about who's in the chat room, how many people. They don't even care about that portion. They care about winning.
Well, I mean, nowadays, I disagree nowadays, though. Nowadays, it is about that, unfortunately, even more than it was. Any news stuff out?
I said they're so young. That's why. The new era.
Yep. The new era. That is very true. Yep. And they're going to find out that you can't get fights done online. It sounds great. You can send contracts and all that, but you're not going to get the fight done online like that. Maybe you can do that and then build the fight, and then sure, that's the seed of it. But to go right to it is kind of goofy. Any other kind of news, Carcino, that you want to talk about, or anything in the boxing world that you want to discuss? Obviously, the tip's about to happen here in Game 3, Nuggets and Lakers. But anything else you want to discuss, sir?
Nothing really too much except for Floyd is sparring, and he's looking well sparring in the ring. He does it late at night. Nobody's really there, but he's sparring in the ring a little bit, getting some timing down and everything, doing his boxing there. He's doing his light training. He hasn't really started any, like, really serious road work or anything like that, but he's just doing light work right now. But he has started some sparring, some light sparring, but it's not like a boxing training camp yet. He just did some light sparring. And then he starts showing, instructing, some of the younger fighters. But, yeah, he's back, like, in the groove, but he's like, secretly moving around doing stuff. When it was looking like,
ready.
Yeah, so he's trying to keep his condition in there and everything else. He always works out, but boxing is a lot different than any other thing we've ever seen. So it's going to happen. T.I. look like he's training, like he's trying to get in shape to fight Floyd. Oh, I would pay to see T.I. versus Floyd. Now, that's the one I want a front row seat to. Because those two do not like each other in real life. So,
hey, that press conference, you want to talk about, they better have security. That's what I do know.
Oh, yeah.
They better have
gonna be a lot of
security.
Yeah. I can see myself being in the middle. There'd be Cinos in the brawl.
Yeah, right? I was just trying to talk to him. Nah, man, you're in it now. Too late. Better yard stream this shit.
Yeah. So
I do like seeing Floyd with Haney. I do like seeing Floyd with Haney and Davis and all these guys in the gym now. That can't hurt these young fighters,
Right. That's good for them to see and get some advice to some of the older fighters, who could really administer that advice. Because you see a lot of the other older fighters, and a lot of them, like from the 80s, all the legends, they're out here looking bad. They were left with nothing.
Too.
Yeah, some of them are. Yeah, and you see people like Magic Marlon Stallings, like as great as he was, and seeing what kind of condition he is. He's having, like, he was a limo driver for a while, driving cars, driving people around, and he had basically nothing left from boxing. All the fights he had, all the championships, he's like, I don't know where my championship belt is. I was like, oh, man, it's just sad how they don't have anything. They had Livingston Bramble. I think he just passed away. I might have that wrong, but I think he did. But even Livingston didn't have anything. The guy Bumpus, he left the game with nothing. James Kinchin, another one, nothing. And these guys were on every weekend fighting. It was like, man, it's like a boxing fight every Saturday. And it was like the Saturday morning cartoons. You had boxing on regular television. So it was a good era, but a lot of those guys didn't know how to save their money. Thomas Hearns went through $40 million. Larry Holmes went through $50 million. And all these guys who supposedly, who had it all, lost it all. Marvin Hagler, he went and made some money, but he went overseas and stuff, but he blew all his millions. And Ray Leonard was never going to lose his money. Ray was the money. So they were going to keep Ray in endorsements and products.
All right, I was going to say, don't go slandering my guy Ray now. Hold on.
No, Ray was the business. He was the market. So when you saw Ray, you saw a symbol of the sport. He took over from Muhammad Ali. So when Ali was gone, he passed the torch over to Ray. So Ray was repping for the sport at that time, and when he was going through his thing, it was like the middleweight that was the show. He made that the show. He made that like the welterweight division, what it is, him and Hearns. They were the ones carrying the sport forward and not the heavyweight. And when Tyson came, him and Ray kind of had this. Like, Ray would talk very negative about Mike whenever he was commentating the fight, and it drove Kevin Rooney insane. Kevin Rooney, when he made sure he was the guest announcer for Ray Leonard versus he was the one sitting there, guest ring announcer with Jim Lampley. And it was Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, and Kevin Rooney.
Yep, I know you're talking about.
Yep, for the Donnie Lalonde Sugar Ray Leonard fight. All you have to do is listen to Kevin Rooney call that fight for Sugar Ray
right.
Leonard.
Yep.
You would have swear he was from the Donnie Lalonde corner. He was rooting.
Seriously.
He was rooting.
I was like throwing my hat at the TV and shit. I was like, okay, you got to do this. I see.
Yeah, he was rooting up a storm for Donnie Lalonde. It was hilarious. I was cracking up. And it was all because Ray was always so critical of Mike. Every fight, he always talked about what Mike needs to work on, what Mike ain't doing well. And everybody's like, oh, he's jealous of Mike. You know, people be frustrated at Ray. And Tyson was like, he always looked up to Sugar Ray. Like that was like one of his idols, you know, coming up. Like, man, you know, watching this guy, Ray, man, this was my guy. So, yeah, at that time, Kevin Rooney was like, oh, he's always got something negative to say. I can't wait to cover the fight. I don't know how they worked that deal out. Kevin Rooney got to critique Sugar Ray Leonard in that fight, but that is hilarious. People probably didn't even know nothing about that backstory. But you go watch the Sugar Ray Leonard fight with Donnie Lalonde, and man, you're gonna see and listen to the most biased commentary.
It's so true too. I bet you Mike's like, all right, you want to keep me under contract, you got to do this. You want my pay-per-views, you got to do this.
Yep. But and Tyson was the one that was gonna bring the sport back to the heavyweight. And that was it, because Larry Holmes was not, he was the champion. And all the fights he was winning, he really didn't carry that symbol of the sport like the ambassador. He was like the chip on the shoulder guy. Everybody hates me, and no one likes Larry. Everybody wants me to leave.
That fight didn't help. That Ali fight, a lot of people were mad, that he did that to Ali. It's like, well, dude, he's in the fight, man. What is he supposed to do? He was taking it easy on him.
Hurt him. Yeah, he's trying to get the ref to stop it. The ref wouldn't stop the fight. He
was crying after the fight. He didn't want to do that to Ali.
No, because Ali shouldn't even have been in the fight. But they had to do it for the money. And you would have thought that, that he would have never fought again. But then they put him in there with, they put him in the ring against Trevor Berbick over there in, Jamaica. And that was, horrifying. So I think the sport of boxing, when Tyson took it over and was going and on his ring, they had nobody else to really give it to. Tyson took the sport by storm. So it went from Ray Leonard over to Tyson. And Tyson was the ambassador and the marketing guy from Japan. He was really the world champion. He was all over the world. Tyson fought in Japan. He fought in
and he did work
Canada.
in that top 10, too. When people go look at it, everyone but Holyfield, he fought that whole top 10. It wasn't like he was just fighting nobody.
Right, and Holyfield wasn't even in a heavyweight at the time. He was a cruiser.
Right, exactly. And Lennox kept getting starts before he'd get to the fight,
Yeah, and then next thing you know, by the time he came up there, if they'd have did the fight back then in 90, 91, Holyfield would have been out, I would have said, in about 6, 7 rounds. If they'd have did that fight then and Tyson was focused, he'd have took him out.
Right.
Even in 1991, when they had the fight originally scheduled, Mike Tyson he would have beat Holyfield. He would have beat Holyfield. Holyfield wasn't strong enough to keep Mike off of him. And that was the thing. Mike would have been all over him. The Holyfield, when they fought later, was like 3-4 times stronger than what he was. And we won't go over the reason. Too. Yeah,
he got
had
a new neck,
new strap, everything. And everybody's like, ooh, what is this? What is this in front of me? Right
you like this, Garcino? I just got this neck installed. How do you like it? That
Yeah,
was like the Kardashians' ass was his neck.
Yep. Oh, man. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you take it easy, man. I appreciate you calling in. Enjoy the fights this weekend. I'm with you on that. I wish there was a theater, that was popping off, because I do like that they give the option of the theater normally with these PBCs, and if you can pay $22 or $25, it helps a lot more. But either way, that Britas Dorticos fight should be fun on DAZN too. But you have yourself a good night. Enjoy the live stream post game too.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Garcino. Peace. All righty. Now, I guess I haven't given my official prediction on what's going on, for the fights this weekend. Not officially, anyway. And just kind of looking at some of these different odds and whatnot. I was talking about earlier how, if you do like Rosario, you may want to take a gander on him. But even that Charlo Daravanchenko, you got Maul by decision plus 120, Maul by KO plus 400, split decision for Sergey. Or I'm sorry, I just looked at it wrong. Daravanchenko, it said SD. Daravanchenko plus 250 for the decision and plus 500 for the knockout. Over under 10.5. So yeah, the over's minus 300. Under is 250. So if you think that there's going to be a knockout, if 10.5. I mean that number's so that's not always, but that number's always lingering in that area a lot when it comes to over unders. If you keep track of some of that stuff, pretty interesting. We'll see how that goes. As far as Mel KO minus 150, this is coming from Jonathan Lear, by the way. Ringwalk John at Ringwalk John. Mel decision plus 275. Rosario KO plus 550. Rosario decision plus 900. Over under 8.5 on that one. Over one. Oh, they're both minus 120. So 8.5 on that one. You may want to take a gander in that area. Okay. So I do think that Charlo will get off to a pretty good start, because it just seems like Daravanchenko, time in, time out, he shows two things. It takes him a while, like I said, and he gets kind of wore out or hurt, even against Cloquet, who's a more solid fighter than people give him credit for. That's just his MO. But as far as stylistically, I think this is going to be a blast. Like, I really do, because Daravanchenko, Charlo, they go for it. Sergey does have that good foundation. He does have some, he's got a pretty good, he's got a decent guard, but a good jab. He sets up his punches. He can, I wouldn't say he can box when you think of being on the outside and all that, but he knows how to fight at somewhat close range, but still use his skill set. He's a little underrated there. But the reason why he's underrated is because, he'll open up and he'll end up getting tagged. And I think, I'm not going to say J-Rock, Charlo, not the ending is what I'm talking about, but, people do forget J-Rock was lighting up Charlo in that fight to an extent. I think I gave him 2 rounds. He was hitting them pretty good. So I think that once we're in that the third, fourth, into the rest of the fight, that's when it's going to heat up. It's going to be back and forth. But I just think if Jacobs can hurt him, if Cloquet can hurt him, I think Charlo's going to hurt him. And he has now taken some punishment over the last couple of years that can just minorly catch up. The Daravanchenko doesn't have a lot of fights. He was a very outstanding amateur, Ukrainian system and whatnot. But I don't know. I don't. Kind of like when John was on earlier, I could see a TKO, but I don't. I'm not sure I'm ready. I think that would be Charlo. He does have a way of crafting his punches where he uses an angle and kind of turns it a certain way to adjust the punch to land something just super flush. And unlike his brother in the past, and even now, he comes with a pretty high guard. Mel, whereas Maul, he'll get touched up, and that's why I think it's a great action fight. I'm gonna say in that 7-5, 8-4 range for Maul. Jamal Charlo will come out of it. I do think he'll knock him down. And if you've been knocked down enough against guys like Jacobs and Golovkin that can punch, out of those guys, like they both will spaz out when they got a guy hurt, especially Jacobs. We've seen Sergio Mora knock him down when he tried to go after him when he had him hurt. So I'm not calling for a knockout. If it is, it's going to be late. So 10.5, I'd probably go over. I think over is a safe bet. But I got Jamal Charlo right around 7-5, 8-4. I think in that range with a knockdown. But yeah, I just see a TKO. If there is a stoppage, I'm thinking TKO. I don't know. I mean, anybody can get touched, and like I said, these performances do add up. But it's been almost a year since that fight, so at least he did get time to heal. And it's not like he hadn't been active previously. Charlo Rosario, I think it'll take a little bit longer to warm up than this one. I do think Charlo, kind of like Carcino was saying, I think he'll be a little bit more cautious early. I think he's going to work the body. I think he's just going to land the better punches. Rosario will get his, and he's not afraid for a fight. So at some point it will open all the way up. But I do think Charlo's going to stop him. Could be TKO. I don't know, but I say stoppage, 8.5. Oh man, that's a good freaking number, man. I got to think about that. I don't know. It's Tuesday, folks. It's Tuesday. I don't know if I'm ready to say under. I just don't know if he'll take him out in the 6th or 7th, especially based off my mindset of what's happening, playing it out in my mind. I think the first couple rounds he's not going to go for it because he'll know, hey, that's when I'm going to get caught probably. Because it's not like J-Rock didn't have a ton of success early, because he did. It's just Charlo. Charlo doesn't have a lot of top-tier names. I agree with Carcino on that, but if you look at his resume, he's got some solid dudes on his career. And I like that he's faced adversity in fights now multiple times, and he's come out of it. I thought he did enough in a very competitive fight to win that first Harrison fight, but I can understand the clean punching and some of those, just the flush shots along with the jab that controlled, Mel a lot. It's too much through that fight, but I thought we can't just go off that because Charlo did. You kind of forget that he'd light him up and then land a combo after that too. So who landed the better shots throughout? I think it was Mel, but that jab movement and man, some of those counter shots, especially earlier in the fight and midway through the fight when it did look like Mel was forcing the issue. And let's not forget, Harrison was beating Hurd. Harrison was beating Willie Nelson and then got stopped too. So I got Charlo winning that. I have Breedis just doing enough with his skill set and his jab, and he's been there and really went there with Usyk and won a fair amount of rounds, the most rounds anybody's won off him. He lost the fight, but still. So I like Breedis in that. Dortico's been, speaking of adding up, that guy's been taking some punches, but kind of like I just talked about, they have had a lot of time off, and sometimes that does work out. I'm going to get to some boxing fight news, some boxing Twitter, a couple of those. Talk a little bit about some other items, but I'm going to go ahead and bring in Wood to the conversation. What's going on, man? How the hell are you on a Tuesday night with the Laker game already tipped off? Are you on mute, Wood, or maybe I caught you off guard? Maybe I caught you off guard. I did kind of just go to you without warning. I'm going to go ahead and text you and get this thing going. Maybe you text me. All right. So, yeah, I do think as far as the undercard goes, though, some of them are just some fights. I mean, they're probably, holding off a little bit on, what the hell's his name? He just fought Seha in a really tough fight, and I can see why they kind of step him sideways instead. But Figueroa, he definitely. I can understand why they're. Well, I think it is like a. I think it actually is like an interim, stuff. I feel. Well, he has a secondary belt as it is, but I think this was actually a mandatory, but he took. I mean, that Seha, it was a draw, right? Yeah, it was a draw. I almost forgot. Yeah, I mean it was a draw. So I can understand why they're kind of moving him that way. Like I mentioned, the Damian Vasquez is who I'm talking about. Yeah, it's the WBA regular. But Casemiro, I like that Duke Mackay fight because I think it's just going to be fun to watch. It's just going to be a brawl. And, Daniel Roman, he's fought some tough fights. And I don't know if he doesn't always separate himself. That's just his thing when he's against pretty solid fighters or high-level guys. I mean, he just fought against MJ earlier this year, a tough fight. And to me, I wonder if that's going to add up to where he'll win the fight. It'll be clean. I think this is for an eliminator, if I'm not mistaken, WBC. And Payano's just he's a quality fighter. He's not going to blow you out of the water. He's got some outside skills. So I think that we could see like 8-4, 9-3 right there. Neri and Almeida or whatever his name is. Yeah, I mean, hey, if Almeida catches him or something, sure. But Neri, you hear Neri's like, I can go to 122 in 118. It's like, dude, just make 122, please. Could you make 122 first? Josh Taylor is in with Kung Sung. I think that's his name. I didn't mean to say that weird. I just realized I did. I don't mean any harm there. Kung Sung, I think it is. This guy has power, but I actually saw it on Twitter the other day that, look at who he's facing. It's like, I hear you. And he could, but I don't think Taylor's going to be around for that. I don't think he'll be just squared up in front of him. Now, if Taylor comes down and tries to be someone he's not, try to go for some knockout right away, sure, for sure. And, he's got Ramirez on his mind. But, I think he'll get it done. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Wood into the Forte. What is going on, sir? How the hell are you on this Tuesday night? And it's kind of like a late summer run here in the 80s in Minnesota. So I'm kind of loving that because we got a little scare early September that we normally do with like 48 degrees at night. And it's like, whoa, I'm not ready. How are things on your end, sir?
Man, no complaints whatsoever. Weather-wise is great. Other than that, man, I don't know. I guess my phone went to mute somehow earlier, but I was sitting here getting a little frustrated that the Nuggets came out so flat, but I see they fought their way back into it. So no concerns on that front tonight that we might get a competitive, Western Conference finals game.
Yeah. And that I still think that doesn't surprise me because that's got that heart, that heartbreaking stuff that happens where you go, we got him, we don't got him. It's kind of like Boston in Toronto Game 3. They were going to go up 3-0. They hit the buzzer beater. Next thing you know, it's a Game 7. So this is definitely a must-win tonight. I know there's the 3-1 thing back-to-back. You ain't 3-1 in Davis and LeBron. That's just not going to happen, even if it takes a Game 7. So we'll see where that goes. What'd you think of last weekend? Lubin, everybody's favorite prospect, Boots. King Tug in a good fight out of nowhere. It sure didn't look like it early, but man, oh boy, I can't wait to see that guy fight again. He really put up a good fight. Pedraza kind of looked apart in my mind. What would you take away from last weekend? Because it did seem like there was a lot of chatter on Lubin in the chats and in the on Twitter and whatnot of people time to force the issue in this fight. And sure enough, he got caught late. And you just wonder if that chin's just going to be lingering there. And also, where do you think Lubin should go? Do you like where I was going with if Charlo wins, drop one of the belts so Lubin can fight a couple other guys? Because, hey, I'm not too pumped about Lubin Charlo right this second rematch,
Right. I think that's going to be a tough sell. I think Lubin, and I was able to get into the e-conference last week and ask him a question or two. And I asked him, that was what I mentioned. I said, we talk online, social media and whatnot. We're still talking about, Floyd's chin and how many times he was officially down or how many times he was down or really hurt. And I just asked him, do you think that with you being stopped in the first round, do you think you've been able to kind of take control of the narrative about who you are, what you are as a fighter? And, of course, he said what he was supposed to say. But I think that look, the optics of that is still fresh in everybody's mind. And then I think, like you said, with getting hurt by a puncher, the level of a puncher that we know Gaucher to be, that's not a good look. That's a tough one, man, because, the guy's kind of fought himself back into that position, but it's kind of those unwritten rules of boxing. And that's going to be I think that's going to be hard to sell, man.
It is. That'll get destroyed on Twitter the second it gets released, dude. That will get destroyed. And, rightfully so, because he still need now, okay, we got him back, 4 fights, 5 fights, got some wins, looked okay, beat Ishe, whatever. Gallimore, okay, cool. Let's get him in with Harrison or Hurd or whatever. One of these guys. They got a lot of guys there. So I think 1 or 2, then maybe all of a sudden in 2021, 2020, 2022, God, that was tough to say. Then all of a sudden you start to go, okay, I'm ready to see this, or at least it's going to be better than what it was, like you're saying.
Yeah, and Hurd, Hurd and Caleb Plant are two of the interesting missing in action guys right now with not getting dates to come back. It's looking like neither one of those guys could be back in 20. So Hurd is a guy that I don't even know if he, can he make 154 in 21?
It seems like the guys that got a fight in had to get back in line. The ones that got a fight in this year so far, they had to get back in line because we still got these guys to fill. Yeah, that's a good question, dude. I know he was on the right path and all that, but you're right. Now that we've had this downtime, that's a great question. And he didn't look particularly good in his last fight either.
Nah, he's another one. That was one of my things I was going to mention with Karama and Ajagba pairing up with Karama. I wasn't a big fan of Karama not being in the ring to give instructions, especially once the fight went kind of south and Ajagba seemed to be kind of out of sorts and just seemed locked up. And Karama's down on the floor barking instructions to the guy. I just didn't like the looks of that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, I actually saw some other folks saw that too and said, "What's all that about?" Fa is just, I don't know. He's just an interesting prospect that I just haven't really quite got a handle on, but it does seem like we're starting to see a ceiling, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I was looking at where he was weight wise. I saw that he was up at like 243, I think. But he, like, Bradley pointed it out how slow he is. He's one of those guys, and I think I kind of like him with more volume versus what Karama is trying to do in making him be maybe more efficient or, to leave himself less exposed. But he's the kind of fighter, man, his level of dynamics or dynamism or whatever, once he starts going, he needs to go. He's not a fast twitch guy. He's not light on his feet. He's just not a dynamic mover. So, kind of like Joe Joyce. Like if he wants to barrel forward and let his hands go, that's what he needs to do.
Right.
But he's just he doesn't look effective at all trying to be like some kind of sniper dude from outside. That I don't know. I didn't like that whatsoever.
Yeah, I hear you. It is kind of like, all right, you can take the opening couple rounds, you can get your jab going, but like you said, it's time to throw. And it doesn't mean you got to throw stuff from left field. It doesn't mean you got to throw 4-punch combos. I mean, who really throws 4-punch combos at heavyweight anyway, let alone a boxing? Not that many, So I get all that, but yeah, it just. And then know that what always brings you back. Because at the start when he's laying dudes out and he's got the look, it was like, oh, I'm gonna check out Fa, But then he'll get that that great punch that moved him across the ring where he didn't even touch him with the jab, but it was there, and bam, that right hand came, and then you're like, oh, that's it, that is it, and that is, I think you stated it right. That's probably it, dude. That's who you are. Be that. I did like the body work. I was thinking about it. Oh, he's going to the body a little bit. But then when I saw, and I know it's CompuBox, but, when you almost half your shots hit to the body, I was like, okay, dude, that helps. I liked what I saw in the second half rather than the first half. I will say that.
Right. And it's not a good look either when you got a guy like Rice and his agility, mobility, comfortably standing right in front of you with his hands lowered, anticipating whatever you're going to do. I don't know if you got to throw some feints in there, maybe some double and triple jabs or something, but he just looked predictable. And I sensed that Rice picked up on the fact that he was thinking too much and kind of in between, approaches and whatnot. So maybe he felt comfortable to do that, but you got a nice thick, round guy like that sitting in front of you, and you can't really touch him the, flush. That's just kind of scary.
Especially when you're getting jabs and hooks right back at your head too. That's making your neck snap back. That's not a good look. It's not a good combination. Not a good combination at all. We'll see where he goes. Let's get into some boots if you don't mind. One of the hottest prospects in the game. I think you got to put him at contender. Like, he's got enough fights, he's got enough knockouts. He is Mr. Eye Test. If you want to look at a test and it's just on the eye, this dude can do a little bit of everything. He mixes it up. I'm still wondering just how great or good or where is he at? Good, very good, or great on defense. And that's what I think we'll see when he has to step up. Maybe he won't be as loose sometimes, but, man, when he can put his punches together, he's in and out. He's a showman. He's really building that underground boxing Twitter, boxing forum type. This dude is the next or whatever. What do you think about his performance? And just, you just hope he can get out of this litigation because there's so many welterweights. He doesn't need to jump to Thurman. There's so many guys that he could fight, but at this moment, you know, where he's not sure he's on the PBC side of things with Showtime, and Showtime's invested money, so I think that helps him. And I think that it'll be more of a slow grow there before he get a big fight. Obviously, like I said, the litigation he's got to get through. But there's plenty of fights that he could get 2 or 3 of them and be like, oh, dude, yeah, he's ready for Spence or whatever. Where do you look at Boots, man? Because it's got a lot of hardcore fight fans just excited about this guy. Like John said, he's just, dude, when he's got a guy in front of him, he's going to take care of him, but he's going to do it in style too.
Yeah, I was more with you over John. I thought him John's comments about him being inaccurate. I didn't agree with that so much, but you know, I'm not saying the guy didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I wouldn't argue, you know, tooth and nail with him over it. But I just thought this was a fight. I thought he clearly came out to fight this guy. I don't think it was all about boxing. And I think one of the things, one of my, because I did a follow-up article on my website, BiteDownBoxing.com. He still hasn't faced a guy who is able to put together an offense against him and what he's doing. And so he's able to dictate and be first and work his jab and get in and out and, you know, side to side and do everything that he wants to do. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see he's going to be where Thurman and Porter were, and maybe to a lesser degree or lesser extent Spence. He's going to be where all those guys were when Floyd was exiting, and none of these guys, you know, Crawford, whether it's Spence, you know, not too many of those guys. We're not going to see those guys against him, I don't think. That's my pessimism in boxing. Like, and you were getting into it earlier with the low reward, high risk. I don't really see him facing none of those guys. Unless somebody is in a bad situation at the end of it and
or
they need a
payday
goes
or something. Al. You know, if you went fully with Al or something, that'd be or Top Rank, he gets to sign a deal.
Right. But I like him, man, because he has good height for the division. Now, like you said, though, I think you mentioned, you know, with the defense, and that's what I was saying. We haven't seen anybody jab with him and kind of dictate anything to him, maybe get inside him and press him a little bit, smother him a little bit. We haven't seen anybody be able to do that, and I don't know when we will. But he took some, you know, his chin was up in the air a little bit, and he caught a couple of wild shots from Abreu. But Abreu, you know, he was doing he was breaking a lot of rules and kind of, that's the thing. This was a fight. You know, Abreu knew that he couldn't box with the kid. Abreu only had 4 rounds total in 2019. The dude was in jail recently, just got his ankle bracelet off, you know, in time for the fight. He was coming in there to brawl and fight. Yeah. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what I liked about Boots is, okay, that's what you want to do? Well, I can do it that way too. And he did it. I thought the power was good. You know, he dropped him with a couple of single shots, like you mentioned. That right uppercut has been, you know, that counter right uppercut has been a hell of a punch lately. I want to say the Escudero kid got put down. Was that a right?
Yeah, you're right.
Uppercut?
Just in general. Yeah, that's a good call. Just in general, it's been active, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so I think he can do it all, man. And you know, I don't know how the hell we get to how he gets into a championship fight. Whether somebody vacates, you know, goes up and vacates something, or he can get himself into the mandatory. But I mean, between him and Virgil Ortiz Jr., you know, I think that's a future fight out there at some point. Hopefully, that would be great to see. I just, like you said, until he gets his business together, who knows what the hell he can even go and do. You know, could he fight a dude like Jamal? I think in an earlier article, you know, I threw it out there about a Jamal James, Ugas. any of those guys, it would be great to see him against. But I think right here, with the Brayu having been in the ring with Kavaliauskas as well as Vesputin, we did get to see some pieces of the puzzle, and get some of the questions answered. But he's definitely, in my opinion, we already mentioned all the attributes that he has, but I felt comfortable Saturday, like nobody could just punk him. You know what I'm saying? He can go in there and kind of handle himself. The kid, Brayu hit him with an intentional low blow, and then he talks to me. I think he said "F you" or something at the end of the round, and it looked like something.
Almost got a brawl at the end of the round, at the end of the round.
Yeah, so I think he showed. Yeah, I think he showed me that he can pretty much handle himself in the ring, and he's not like some of the other PBC guys that came up and got some, a vacant title shot really early, or just got a fight early. He seems to be able to conduct him, to cover all the bases in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, ever since he got on Showbox and maybe these last 5 fights, they have minorly stepped, prospect level, of course, but they haven't stepped him up, minorly, of course, but still. Guy has really passed with flying colors, and that's why I'm willing to say the dude's a contender, man. I don't care what anybody says about, but he hasn't done it. He's got to beat someone in the top 10 to beat. Okay, dude, but we can argue over 7 to 12 or 13. Like, who gives a shit? The dude is a contender. He's ready to go. And he's 23, so, yeah, you hope that it's not like a 2-year thing before he get even to some sort of interim or, quality fight, even the guys you just mentioned. You'd hope that that he can get that so that he doesn't fall into any kind of mode of, these guys they're not shit in front of me, so I'm just going to keep doing, so you can create some bad habits, not in the gym, not outside of I'm not talking about that, but just in the actual, the focus in the ring. And then, you gotta develop even more when you actually face these top guys. So, I mean, if you sign with Top Rank and they put him, I think they'd be willing to put him in with some guys over there before Crawford. Whoever gets him, though, that record is going to look so good, isn't it? Like, when you see that on the other side, it's like people, like, that you put that on Fox or ESPN and you line up 2 dudes, that record with all those knockouts and just his style and just everything, he just needs that opportunity, and it feels like he's going to hit the ground running.
Yeah, another, maybe could be an option. You mentioned Top Rank. If they can get the fight they can get that undisputed fight in if Kansong doesn't upset that apple cart, and they get Taylor and Ramirez, and both of those guys end up going up. Boots did. I got a chance to talk to him when he was up in Flint for the Shields fight that was up there. When she didn't actually get to fight that night, but he mentioned he was more than capable of going down to 140. So if they vacated those belts or however it went down and the belts became open down there, and he can truly make that. And I don't think that would be a bad move for him because, like you said, I don't want to see this kid linger around for another 1.5, 2 years before he gets to do something meaningful. So if he could go down to 140 and do something there, I think that would be great.
Yeah. Like Pedraza at 140, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that, but now I look at his frame. You're right. He's tall. He's big. He's got a good reach, but I could see him maybe making 140. I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, I think it's on. I think the interview was on my channel. I think he said on there, he was good to make 140. He was 146 on the weigh-in last week. So if he could do that, man, I think that might be a beneficial to take. Because like I said, man, him fighting a Spence, him fighting a Danny Garcia, him fighting a Sean Porter or a Thurman, I don't see none of that happening.
No, if you're not tied, No one's, even a Crawford, to be honest with you, because if you're not tied to it, and the manager, promoter, whatever the hell you want to call it, doesn't have about a few options on you, that shit ain't gonna happen. It's just not. It's not happening. You might as well just stop it. And that's where I like some of your ideas to keep them going, so we can keep them growing that underground thing. And like I said, when he gets on the marquee, wherever that is, that record, his style, it will resonate, man. It will resonate, no doubt about it. Let's pick up the pace a little bit. Let's get into the double trouble here. Charlo Daravanchenko on paper is the tighter fight. We'll start with that, and then follow up with Charlo Rosario. How do you see those two fights playing out, sir?
Man, I'm all over the place with these two fights. You had me going one way. Carcino had me thinking something else with Daravanchenko. The one thing that I don't like about Daravanchenko is his height. I think he's undersized for middleweight. I don't think he has great tail of the tape numbers, but I definitely think he has a different rhythm, a different intensity, and enough boxing to make Maul a little to give him some fits a little bit. Another thing, a big concern of mine, and I'm not, you had Carcino was kind of taking some shots at PBC a little bit, then John was kind of giving them some love and whatnot, but Jamal, his competition over the last 18 months just hasn't been that great. I mean, Adams,
not at 160.
and then Adams at 154 guys up at middleweight. He blows away Hogan. Yeah, Hogan didn't do a whole lot. So
besides the back flip.
Right. So I'm wondering.
You stop, drop, and roll.
Right. So I'm just wondering, when you get a guy in there that can handle himself pretty decent, how does that play out? So I think he could get off, and then coming off of this break that everybody's coming off of, these are some emotional guys. Both of those guys, they're driven off of emotion and whatnot, and they're going to be in this different environment that they haven't encountered. So I think it's a couple of things working against them. Also, I was able to get in on the e-conference for the Twins a couple of weeks ago. They had Jamal on Monday and Jamel on Tuesday. To be honest, and everybody can draw whatever conclusions they want to draw from what these fighters say in these press conferences, but the fact that Jamal really couldn't articulate what his plans, all he said was, I want to fight. He's supposed to be better than me. I didn't have to take this fight. I want to fight. That's really was the gist of what he had to say, and it seems like he's a little uptight. I was trying not to read too much into it because it is just words. But I don't know, man. It's like you said earlier. It's Tuesday. I haven't really quite settled in on where I'm going to be. I just think we're going to get some good questions answered about exactly where Jamal is. They did come out. I've seen a couple different videos, and Carcino mentioned it about him turning down a date with Canelo. So I don't know what I'm looking at with the Charlos, to be honest. I'm a little bit, and we can transition to Jermell and Rosario. I don't know what the hell Rosario is. I don't know what the hell was going on in Philadelphia with Julian Williams, J-Rock, and now to see J-Rock and Breadman part ways, that kind of led me to believe that J-Rock cut some corners in camp and maybe overlooked Rosario a little bit. And I think you guys hit on it. I think that's just going to be some exploring and some probing until it turns into a fight. I think both of those guys want to bang. I don't think Rosario is sophisticated enough of a fighter or a boxer to do the things that Tony Harrison was able to do against Jermell. And I think I also like the fact in Jermell's interview or his media availability, he actually credited, although they talked all that stuff and it was a lot of disrespect there, he actually was really honest, I thought, in talking about how everything that Tony Harrison did helped him to grow. Because I think he was kind of out of solutions in that fight. But since he didn't give up and he took another run at it, whatever round that was, the 10th or 11th, when he stopped him,
right.
I think he was kind of tactically. I think he didn't have much else to go to, but he didn't quit, you know, and he didn't want to end up. He didn't want to let it go to the cards. So I think at some point in this fight, one of these guys is going to hurt each other, and it's just going to be a fight. And the man that could take the best shot, I think, will be the one that wins.
Dan, it feels like Rosario has shown that he can get clipped.
Right.
He's got, I mean, everybody can clip, but, you know, at a level that is not on the Charlo level. And I like how he said, just to piggyback with Mel, I like how he said, you know, it mentally sharpened me. I thought I won the fight, but then again, you know, the last 18 months now, I'm more mentally sharp. I'm more even into it. I'm more, you know, I like that he, a few years ago, said, F it, I'm going to go forward. I thought maybe, man, are you sure? Because you have some outside skill, dude. But you do need a guy to come to you. And that Jackson fight 4 years ago really showed his weakness, but he has tightened it up. Is that his strength? Like, is that his number one game? I don't think so. I think if it's in the middle of the ring and it's just a skill fest in the middle, not coming forward, not necessarily going back, but just in the middle, I think he's really comfortable there and kind of pivoting and that type of thing. But I don't know. The whole Rosario full camp stuff, you know, that does – it just lingers in the back of my head. You know, it does linger. It does kind of linger. Anything else, sir?
Yeah.
Because we are kind of getting close to the borderline here of the end of the show.
Yeah, I'm with you on quickly. I'm with you on Pedraza. I thought he looked pretty good, and I think it's. I don't think we do enough. We give enough respect to these guys who have a bad night like he had against Gervonta Davis, and has come back and kind of stuck to it and fashioned himself into a credible guy. You know, 2 divisions up now. You know, he had the decent fight. You know, did his thing against Lomachenko on a losing effort, but you know, he pounded out Lespierre. You know, I just like that the guy's been able to turn things around. Is he a killer at 140 the way that Bradley mentioned? You know, I don't get that.
Right, nobody wants to fight him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not buying that. But like I said, it's good to see a guy get totally outclassed and get beat up really badly, and then come back a couple of years later and, you know, that's not the end of the story for him. So I like what I'm seeing in him. And I think another interesting thing that you mentioned, and I said this earlier, I did earlier today, I put out kind of, it's a lot of boxing this week, so I did like a review maybe, or a preview on the world, just the weekend in boxing, when you have it on all of these different platforms and trying to help people out. Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting storyline come next Monday and Tuesday is what, and Carcino mentioned it, what does this fight do for the Charlo brand and then for pay-per-view? You know, where are people with inviting a bunch of different people into their homes to go in on a fight? You know, I think it seems like individually, I don't know if people are really all that worried about, you know, COVID-19 and whatnot. I know Bob has
it's a good friend or something. But sometimes a boxing friend's not a great friend, you know? It's just something you have in common.
Exactly. Exactly. So what do these numbers look like? And you know, I'm not kind of on the same page as Carcino with nobody wanting to see the Charlos. I think they do have a decent enough of a following, especially according to today's standards. But I just want to see who is really putting money into these guys this weekend. With the ESPN Plus card being out there, you know, Taylor, and then also at noon, starting at noon with the World Boxing Super Series, I'll be honest, as a guy who doesn't have you know, I can't attract anybody around to come invest with me. I got to foot the whole bill. I was like, man, I probably could get my fill of boxing just watching the stuff that I already paid for. But, I mean, I'm going to have to tune in and see. Like you said, there is good value. I know that there was no way they were going to come at this with a $65 or some other price point. I mean, it was going to be $75. But not to ramble though. The other thing is, since some of us are thinking that the Daravanchenko fight could be the closer fight, or it could be an upset there, what would happen going into Jamel's fight if he sees his brother lose, and we got that intermission in there, and then we got the other two fights in front of him? That's what I think
point
helps. That I brought up.
That's what I think helps. He's got some time to separate it. He's got a little time to separate it, and not a little, but a lot. I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to say that too. I think that actually will make a difference.
Right. So, like you said, man, I mean, you and John covered a lot of ground earlier than you and Carcino covered a lot of ground. There wasn't much more else that I really had to add. Like I said, I'm just hoping, some of the criticism towards the zone over the last 2 years and whatnot, and now going through this lawsuit thing with Canelo, and just the state of business, or the state of boxing business as it is, I just like to see some good news this weekend. I like to see some good performances out of the Charlo twins, whether they win or lose or draw. And, the business and the complaining stuff not be the bigger story.
We got to shelf that. There's a time and a place. Let's shelf it. It's fight week. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm with you, dude. I'm with you.
Yeah, because, I mean, we can criticize the zone all we want, but and people can complain about the guys they had, the commentary team, the schedule, the way that COVID-19 has impacted them and their schedule. We can complain about whatever is the language in this in the contract that they had, so on and so forth. I mean, but I felt like all in all that they came into the sport trying to give people some value. And it's just like they
did, but that price point would have never worked long term. So did they try to only do that? Because I'll tell you what, second quarter and fourth quarter last year, that's value, period. I don't care who's saying what. That's value. However, when you start to hear the premium opponents, and it's McGregor and this guy and Oscar De La Hoya against Canelo, that also tells me that, hey, it wasn't all about just pleasing the fans, which I didn't think it would either. But I don't think that the media was actually all that hard on them, because some of them got paid by them, their sponsorship.
Oh, yeah.
But we have heard a lot of backlash. We've heard a lot of backlash, though, especially now. Overall, we did. I mean, their second and fourth quarter, though, that was the bomb. Yeah,
and that's what I said. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they made some mistakes. They probably they probably they weren't conservative in the number of the audience that they could attract over there. But the thing is, if this pay-per-view doesn't do well, Showtime is, despite how much effort and how the quality and the value that Showtime has tried to provide, you can see now. I mean, they came back. The numbers weren't great for Benavidez.
Seconds, so you know. To cut you off, you know why.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say, leave it there. They came back, and the Leo fight wasn't that well received. And then the Benavidez fight took a hit with him losing his title on the scale, and his numbers weren't great. So it's not like Showtime is balling out either with its, the support of consumers there.
Right. That's very true. We're in that moment where it decides when to just shut off, so you can keep going if you'd like.
Oh, okay. Well, like I said, everybody's kind of taking some hits. I mean, quietly, ESPN Plus wasn't doing a whole lot for several months, and now they've just come back online with the Joe Joyce fight, Dubois, and then this weekend, and I think the last 2 weekends have been on ESPN Plus. So, like I said, man, I see it all over the place. And I do think a lot of people have tried to do the best. I mean, you know, there's criticism with the cards that Top Rank put together, but again, they were the first ones back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody even knew how to go about putting this protocol together. Nobody even had a model to use.
Well,
until,
I mean, the UFC had a model, but boxing-wise, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't like how, dude, look at the fall schedule, all things considering. It's a pretty damn good schedule. I think people need to just wake up and hear that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you're sitting here disgruntled and unhappy, and we have what we have under the circumstances that we're in, I mean, damn, then you're just not likely to be pleased about too much. Looks like they got me.